Chapter 548. The arrival of the Holy Church had also indirectly caused the secret of the Great Illusionary Land to be deliberately publicized by some people. From this, Qin Xueqing finally understood why Chenghua and Yizhi had not returned to Earth. It was not that they did not want to come back, but that they had no way to come back. Thinking back, when the secret of the Great Illusionary Land had just been leaked, many people rushed to the Great Illusionary Land with the mentality of giving it a try. Everyone wanted to obtain opportunities and adventures from it, so they did not care about the quota limit. In short, whether the rumors were true or false, they had to try it first. There was no chance before, but now that the opportunity was in front of them, who could resist the temptation? The result was naturally overjoyed. The limit of 3,000 places seemed to have been lifted, so whether it was Jindan or Yuanying, as long as they dared to go, they would definitely be able to enter the Great Illusionary Land smoothly. The sudden surprise also caused the people to lose their rationality. During that time, the battle at the Supreme Palace enclosure was the most intense. The 4 spiritual masters and the 12 kings were fighting fiercely, and the major forces of the 9 regions were also busy resisting the attack of the Holy Church. It was obviously impossible to be distracted and care about other people in a battle of life and death at the supreme level. Instead of staying in the Supreme Palace enclosure and praying that the flames of war would not burn their heads, it was better to risk their lives and go to the Great Illusionary Land. If they really got lucky and luckily obtained some adventure, wouldn't they be able to completely reach the peak of life? With such a fantasy, for a time, there were as many cultivators going to the Great Illusionary Land as carps crossing the river. But as more and more people entered the Great Illusionary Land, no one came back. People finally realized where the problem was. Could it be? This place could only be entered and not exited? After a series of suicidal repeated confirmations, the Great Illusionary Land had completely become a forbidden area in people's minds. As long as no one left alive, no one would dare to break in again. So according to the current situation, Qin Xueqing should never see Chenghua and Yizhi again. Unless she personally made a trip to the Great Illusionary Realm, she wouldn't even be able to determine whether the 2 of them were dead or alive. And since she couldn't find Chenghua and Yizhi, what reason did Qin Xueqing have to continue staying in this war-torn and turbulent Supreme Palace enclosure? At that moment, Qin Xueqing couldn't help but hesitate. She even had the urge to immediately return to Earth. But soon Qin Xueqing's pursuit of martial arts calmed her down once again. If she wanted to concentrate on cultivating in seclusion, why would she bother to come all the way to the Supreme Palace enclosure? Wasn't the turbulent Supreme Palace enclosure a great stage for her to train herself? Therefore, after adjusting her mentality, Qin Xueqing temporarily settled down in the Supreme Palace enclosure. The Supreme Palace enclosure was a very big stage. Now she was just a small behind-the-scenes worker. Therefore, Qin Xueqing couldn't help but look forward to the day when she would also step onto the stage. Since her sister-in-law had settled down in the Supreme Palace enclosure, let's talk about Nianyan first. Important things had to be said 3 times. Although Nianyan was only 9 years old now, she was already in the 6th grade. What did it mean to be in the 6th grade? The capital-affiliated primary school didn't have a middle school department, which meant that the children in the 6th grade could do whatever they wanted on campus. Moreover, on the first day of school, the homeroom teacher directly appointed Nianyan to be the class monitor of the 6th grade class 2. The teacher made this arrangement partly to take care of this little girl who had skipped 2 grades. On the other hand, it was entirely because of the good reputation she had built up in the capital-affiliated primary school over the years. Any teacher who had taught Nianyan would be full of praise for this smart, sensible, and clever child. Therefore, the homeroom teacher had a reason not to let Nianyan be the class monitor. Okay, Chen Yan will be our class monitor from now on. She skipped 2 grades in the past and is younger than all of you, so you must not bully her in the future. If I find out that anyone dares to bully her, I'm sure all of you know the consequences. The homeroom teacher of the 6th grade class 2 was a middle-aged man, so he wasn't as gentle as the other teachers. Instead, he pretended to be fierce and gave the class a warning. Remember this. In terms of life, Chen Yan is your little sister. But in terms of studies, you must learn from her. Although she skipped 2 grades, she still scored 100% on the pretest. But what about all of you? Okay, I won't say anything more. Everyone be alert and let's start class now. On the podium, the homeroom teacher lectured with spittle flying everywhere. Then he patted Nian Nian's shoulder and squeezed out a smile. Chun Nian, you're small, so you'll sit here in the future. The teacher pointed to the seat closest to the podium. Then Nian Nian carried her school bag and obediently came to this excellent place with good feng shui. It was a little strange. Nian Nian was short, so it was reasonable for her to sit in the first row. But her deskmate was not only taller than her, she was also much bigger. Sitting there, she was like a pagoda that could suppress demons. She could practically block the view of the students behind her. Moreover, she was a girl. A fat girl who weighed at least 150 pounds. Suddenly meeting such an outstanding classmate, Nian Nian couldn't help but take a second look at her. But she didn't expect this fat girl to treat her as if she didn't exist. Even though the whole class was paying attention to Nian Nian, the fat girl still shrugged her head and turned a deaf ear to everything around her. Soon Nian Nian's first class in the 6th grade class ended. As a new classmate, Nian Nian felt that she had an obligation to take the initiative to integrate into the group. So she took the initiative to greet the fat girl next to her across the aisle. Hello, I'm Chun Nian. What's your name? Nian Nian had skipped 2 grades, so she already had experience. So her adaptability could be said to be very strong. She didn't feel shy at all. Who would have thought? Nian Nian wasn't afraid of strangers, but the fat girl next to her was. She just patted the girl's arm out of courtesy, but she didn't expect the girl to be so scared that she started trembling. Nian Nian's face was full of black question marks. She thought that she had accidentally scared the girl. But before she could apologize, the fat girl directly covered her head with her hands, and then leaned over the table like an ostrich. The classmate behind Nian Nian also saw this scene. So this boy who looked like a skinny monkey immediately pointed at the fat girl in front of him and laughed loudly. Chun Nian, ignore her. She's a fool. Ha ha ha, fool, big fool. Ha 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 ha. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 549. Today was the first day of school after all. Except for Nian Nian, everyone in the class was old acquaintances. Therefore, after a summer break, everyone naturally had endless topics to talk about with each other. Perhaps wanting to attract everyone's attention, this skinny monkey-like boy saw the interaction between Nian Nian and the chubby girl and deliberately laughed loudly. And such a pretentious laugh naturally attracted the attention of the other students in an instant. All of a sudden, Nian Nian's position became the focus of the entire class. Yo, isn't this the big idiot in our class? I haven't seen you for a few months. Why are you still so fat? Didn't your mother tell you to lose weight? Ha 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 ha. Unlike Nian Nian, who skipped 2 grades, most children who studied to the 6th grade were concentrated at the age of 11 or 12, which was basically half a teenager. In addition, children nowadays were very precocious, so they naturally knew more than the children of Chen Xi's generation. Of course, being precocious didn't mean being sensible. It was precisely because of this that introverted children were more introverted, and extroverted children were more extroverted. When toys and cartoons were no longer their only pursuit, teasing and ridiculing their classmates became a way for them to relax. Put yourself in their shoes? Put yourself in their shoes and think for others? Sorry, children at the age of 11 or 12 didn't understand this slightly complicated theory. Just like a joke that was once popular on the internet. A reporter went to the South Pole to interview a group of penguins. He asked the first penguin, "What do you do every day?" The penguin replied, "Eat, sleep, play with Dowdo." Then he asked the second penguin. The penguin still replied, "Eat, sleep, play with Dowdo." The reporter asked the other penguins with confusion, but the result was the same in the end. So the reporter continued to ask 99 penguins like this. When the reporter asked the 100th little penguin, the little penguin gave a different answer. "Eat, sleep." The reporter asked in surprise, "Why don't you play with Dowdo?" The little penguin pouted, glared at the reporter, and replied, "I am Dowdo." Was this really a joke? No, no, no. In fact, it was a complete tragedy. Because behind the 99 happiness, There was always a hidden pain that had no place to complain. The fat girl's name was Litangua. This was a poetic name, but unfortunately, it did not match her appearance at all. Litangua was 12 years old this year. She was 1.6 meters tall, but her weight was an astonishing 150 kilograms. When she stood there, she was like a big bucket. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with childhood non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, also known as severe fatty liver disease. This kind of disease was not fatal and could be eliminated by recuperation. Therefore, after some treatment, Litangua's parents let the child go back to school. And this was the beginning of Litangua's tragedy. She used to be a lively and cute little girl. However, as her body grew fatter, Litangua gradually became silent, and her grades began to plummet. Although the head teacher of the 6th grade class 2 was a male teacher, he still noticed the change in Litangua's mentality. Therefore, in order to encourage and help the child, the teacher moved Litangua to the first row so that she could be urged to study hard at any time. Her teacher's intentions were good, but this arrangement directly led Litangua to walk from behind the scenes to the front of the stage, as if there was a spotlight on her at all times. From the day she moved to the first row, Litangua felt that dozens of pairs of eyes were following behind her at all times. Her classmates were all looking at her. Her classmates were all laughing at her. She was afraid that her broad body would block the line of sight of the students in the back row. So she always bent her waist and hunched her back, trying her best to shrink her head. She never dared to go to the toilet because she was afraid of the strange gazes from both sides of the corridor. She tried hard to hide herself, but the spotlight on her became more and more dazzling. She was different from Nian, who was a white swan that everyone loved. She was born an ugly duckling that no one liked. In order to lose weight, Litangua tried to go on a hunger strike. But even if she was so hungry that she was about to faint, her weight did not decrease at all. Instead, it increased a little. Because she was fat, she suffered a huge psychological pressure that she should not have to endure at her age. For those students with obvious physical disabilities, it was precisely because of their obvious physical defects that they were not easy to bully and ridicule, because their weakness was reflected on the surface. Even children knew that they could not bully the disabled, let alone these 11 or 12-year-old teenagers. Litangua was different. She did not have any obvious disabilities. She was just plain fat. Therefore, mocking her for being fat had gradually become a custom in grade 6, class 2. Regardless of whether they were boys or girls, regardless of their conduct, regardless of whether their grades were good or bad, in short, everyone was disgusted and disliked this fat girl who was like a bucket. Almost every class had children who were ostracized. But children like Litangua, who were both ostracized by others and ostracized by themselves at the same time, were very few. How could the pressure and pain she was enduring in her heart be understood by ordinary people? Hearing the words big fool constantly ringing in her ears, Nian suddenly woke up from her shock. Why did everyone call Litangua a big fool and not a big fatty? Wasn't it because she was stupid? When she was mocked by others, she would only bury her head deep in her arms like an ostrich. Just like what Nian saw now. Looking at the new desk mate in front of her who was as fat as a pig but as timid as a mouse, Nian suddenly stood up and let out the angriest roar in her life to the entire class. Enough! All of you shut up. Shut up! Although Nian was young, her petite figure stood there, but it was as if she was a stabilizing force. In an instant, the entire class fell silent. At that moment, everyone did not understand what kind of madness she had. Perhaps it was because they were suppressed by Nian's aura, or perhaps it was because she had the support of the head teacher. In short, after everyone saw Nian's angry face, they decisively shut their mouths. No one stood up to continue to challenge the authority of the new class leader. Seeing that everyone was quiet, Nian took a deep breath, turned around and shouted to the class, "I announce! From today onwards, you are not allowed to call her a big fool anymore. And you are not allowed to bully her anymore. If I find out that anyone is still bullying her, then I will definitely tell the teacher and the principal." Come. Wonderful Book House. Come. Chapter 550. Her announcement shocked the entire class. Everyone seemed to be unable to understand the reason behind Nian Nian's anger, but after seeing her serious expression, no one dared to stand up and oppose her. Skinny Monkey was sitting behind Nian Nian. He opened his mouth to speak, but in the end, he swallowed the ridicule that was about to come out. After all, a sixth grader was not young anymore. Everyone had their own thoughts. Although Nian Nian had attacked everyone in the class, this method of not specifically targeting a particular person would not cause everyone to be angry. Otherwise, it would be impossible for everyone to attack her. Nian Nian had just joined the class, so everyone was still unsure of her personality, so it was impossible for them to get into a conflict with her over such a small matter. Therefore, after a short period of silence, the classroom immediately returned to its usual clamor. Everyone ignored Nian Nian. Those who were fooling around continued to fool around, and those who were chatting continued to chat as if the unpleasant incident had never happened. Although Li Tangyue did not raise her head, she could hear the movements around her. Seeing that everyone was no longer ridiculing her, Li Tangyue carefully raised her head to observe her surroundings. Nian Nian saw her actions, so she smiled at her and then sat back down in her seat as if no one was around. "Thank you." Looking at Nian Nian's calm appearance, Li Tangyue hesitated for a moment before carefully thanking her. "It's okay. If anyone dares to bully you in the future, just tell me. I'll make the decision for you." Perhaps because she had done a good deed, Nian Nian was in a good mood, so she did not care about the strange gazes around her and directly patted her chest to accept this little brother. Soon, the break between classes was over. The second class began. Nian Nian secretly observed Li Tangyue for a while. Only then did she realize that she liked to deliberately bend her body in class, as if she was afraid that she would block the view of the students behind her. Therefore, as soon as the class ended, Nian Nian went straight to the form teacher's office and told her thoughts. She hoped that the teacher could move Li Tangyue to the window so that Li Tangyue would not block the other students. At the same time, she also hoped that the teacher would let her sit behind Li Tangyue. This way, she could protect Li Tangyue at any time and prevent her from being ostracized by her classmates. The teacher decisively agreed to her request. And this was the privilege that Nian Nian had as a merit student, the leader of the young pioneers, and the class monitor of Year 6 Class 2. It had to be said that Nian Nian really did things swiftly and decisively. After receiving the teacher's warning, she took advantage of the break between classes to quickly complete a series of seat changes. At this point, Nian Nian and Li Tangyue had become the unshakable front and back seats. And it was precisely because of Nian Nian's appearance that Li Tangyue's gloomy primary school life finally ushered in a ray of light. After school in the afternoon, Nian Nian told Chen Shi all the good things she had done today. Although Chen Shi already knew what had happened, he still pretended to be very surprised, and then praised the little girl. Although Nian Nian always had the attitude of a class monitor in school, in front of Chen Shi, she would always be that little girl who never grew up. Therefore, after hearing Chen Shi's praise, the little girl immediately showed a proud look and walked with a bouncing and jumping nonstop. The father and daughter walked leisurely for a while. At this time, Nian Nian seemed to have thought of something and suddenly turned to Chen Shi and said, "Dad, we won't do the exercises between classes in the future, and we won't have PE class either." "And why? Didn't the Ministry of Education stipulate that schools must have PE class?" Hearing this, the little girl's face was filled with excitement and said, "We'll change to martial arts. In the future, we'll practice our hut fist during the exercises between classes, and PE class will also be changed to martial arts class." This was important news that the teacher announced before school ended, so that the children would remember to tell their parents at home. Practice our hut fist during the exercises between classes? Changing PE class to martial arts class? So fast. The moment he heard this news, Chen Shi couldn't help but frown slightly. He remembered Grandpa Deng once said, the popularization of computers had to start from a child's age. 30 years had passed in the blink of an eye, computers had long been popularized. And now it was martial arts' turn? Martial arts had the function of strengthening the body, so using our hut fist to replace the exercises between classes seemed to be a very normal operation. After all, this was only a set of beginner-level fist techniques. Could it be that they really expected the children to rely on this set of Arhut fist to practice obvious strength? Practicing martial arts was so hard. If they didn't slack off and cheat, the teacher should thank the heavens. However, everything had to be thought deeply. This seemed to be a simple move to cater to the current trend, but there was a deeper meaning behind it. If Chun-Shi guessed correctly, once the Arhut fist entered the school and officially entered the stage of popularization, the Wu Alliance would then select the most talented and outstanding children and send them to a newly established national exemplary school. A special school that only taught cultivation and nothing else. Chun-Shi was slightly lost in thought. The little girl waited for a while. Seeing that Chun-Shi didn't respond, she couldn't help but pout, then grabbed Chun-Shi's arm and said with an aggrieved face, "Dad, you said before that you would let me learn martial arts. In the end, you didn't let me go to the training class. Are you going back on your word?" After hearing Nian-Nian's words, Chun-Shi's face suddenly showed an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Could it be that this child had been thinking about this all along? As mentioned before, Chun-Shi did teach the little girl how to cultivate qi, but he still didn't teach the little girl how to use the vital essence in her body. Nian-Nian was very sensible, so when she mentioned it to Chun-Shi before, she never mentioned it again after Chun-Shi changed the topic. And the reason why she brought it up again today was because this matter had indeed been hidden in her heart for a long time. Many students in the class signed up for the martial arts training class, but she didn't. Although she could ride a horse, skate, swim, and draw. But now the most popular thing was martial arts. Did they think she didn't have vanity? Unknowingly, Nian-Nian had already developed the habit of doing the best in everything and fighting for the first place in everything. But it was a pity. Dad still refused to teach her martial arts, and didn't agree to let her go to the martial arts training class. Seeing the little girl's aggrieved face, Chun-Shi hesitated for a moment, then smiled and pinched her little face, asking, "What's wrong? Are you angry with Dad?" "I'm not." Hearing Chun-Shi say this, the little girl suddenly turned her head to the side, pouted her mouth and pretended to be angry. Why was Chun-Shi unwilling to teach her martial arts? Wasn't it because he was afraid that she would accidentally kill a classmate? But thinking about it carefully, with Nian-Nian's current intelligence, she shouldn't make such a low-level mistake, right? Thinking of this, Chun-Shi smiled and hugged her, then said with a gentle face, Okay, my precious baby. Don't be angry, okay? Dad will teach you, okay?" Hearing Chun-Shi say this, Nian-Nian's eyes suddenly lit up. "Really? Of course, more real than real gold. Then I want to learn martial arts that are more powerful than the Arhut fist." "Oh, do you know what martial arts are more powerful than the Arhut fist?" Chun-Shi smiled and asked in return. He didn't expect Nian-Nian's next answer to not know whether to laugh or cry. "Everyone says the Nine-Yang Divine Technique is powerful. I also want to learn the Nine-Yang Divine Technique. Dad, can you teach me the Nine-Yang Divine Technique?" Chapter 551. Nine-Yang Divine Art? Chun-Shi didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard the little girl's words. Let's not talk about whether Chun-Shi knew the Nine-Yang Divine Art or not. Even if he followed the original text and forcefully derived a technique similar to the Nine-Yang Divine Art, this technique was obviously not something Nian-Nian could practice. After all, how could a girl practice the Nine-Yang Divine Art? If she wanted to practice it, she should practice the Nine-Yin Sutra. No wonder the little girl didn't forget Nian-Nian's Nine-Yang Divine Art. With the rise of martial arts craze, wuxia dramas naturally regained their vitality. Classics such as the Condor Shooters trilogy and The Smiling, Proud Wanderer were replayed on TV over and over again every day. Although Nian-Nian was a girl, didn't she often use the 18 dragons subduing palms and 9 solitary swords when she played with Wen and Ming? When he saw his daughter foolishly shouting out the 18 dragons subduing palms, Chun-Shi didn't think much of it. He only thought that the child had grown up, so her interests and hobbies had changed. Now that he thought about it, Chun-Shi realized that he took it for granted. The reason was that the seed of cultivation had already been planted in the little girl's heart. And now, it was time for this seed to break through the soil and sprout. "You silly child, the Nine-Yang Divine Art is only passed to males and not females. Didn't you listen to the lines carefully when you were watching TV? If a girl practices the 9-yang divine art, she will grow a lot of facial hair like a man. So even if Daddy really knows this technique, there's no way I can teach it to you. After hearing the little girl's request, Chunshi smiled and rubbed her head. Hearing this, the little girl suddenly pouted with slight disappointment. I can't learn the 9-yang divine art. I'm so angry. VV. Then I want to learn the muscle bone strengthening scripture. I don't know how. Wave-like subtle steps? I don't know how either. Star-absorbing technique? Daddy. Then what do you know? In the end, the little girl's face was already full of unhappiness. Because in her heart, her father was an omnipotent Superman, but now he said that he couldn't do anything. Therefore, in Nianyan's eyes, this was clearly Chunshi's excuse for not wanting to teach her martial arts. Just now, he had clearly said that he would teach her a martial art that was more powerful than the Arhut fist, but in the blink of an eye, he had started to change the topic and started to laugh. How could she be happy? Humph, Daddy is the most shameless. Thinking of this, Nianyan no longer paid attention to Chunshi. Carrying her backpack, she angrily strode forward, clearly wanting to distance herself from Chunshi. Yo, who made our family's darling angry again? It was rare to see Nianyan throw a tantrum. Although Chunshi found it funny, he didn't dare to continue teasing her. If he really made the child cry, then it would be his turn as the father to be put in an awkward position. Thinking of this, Chunshi immediately went forward, and directly carried the angry little guy in a princess carry, forcibly hugging him in her arms. Ah! Under the sudden attack, Nianyan instinctively cried out. But very quickly, she quietly laid in Chunshi's arms, her head lowered, not saying a word. Seeing this, Chunshi tried to throw her into the air to scare her. Unexpectedly, this girl pouted and didn't react at all, as if she was sure that Chunshi wouldn't dare to let go of her. Looking at this, Nianyan was really angry this time. Therefore, Chunshi immediately kept the smile on his face, and said to her sincerely, Nianyan, don't be angry, come. Daddy will let you ride the horse, okay? No. Why not? Daddy is shameless. I don't like Daddy anymore. Chunshi carried Nianyan, and walked quickly on the sidewalk. The father and daughter bickered and whispered to each other, as if there was no one around. It was obvious that Nianyan was pretending to be angry. In fact, how could she bear to be angry with her father? It was said that a daughter was her father's lover in his previous life. When Chunshi saw the envious gazes of the passers-by, he suddenly realized he hadn't carried Nianyan in a long time. Speaking of which, it was strange. He didn't know when it started, but Nianyan didn't like to be carried by Chunshi as they walked. Perhaps it was because she had grown up, so she didn't want to be carried in her parents' arms all the time like when she was young. Okay. Daddy will sincerely apologize to you now. I said before that I would teach you martial arts, but I still haven't taught you after so long. It's all Daddy's fault, don't be angry with Daddy, okay? After Chunshi comforted her with kind words, Nianyan finally stopped pouting. After hearing her snort, she used her big eyes to stare at Chunshi, as if hinting that Chunshi should show enough sincerity first. Then she would consider whether to forgive this shameless daddy. 2 years ago, it was Qin Xueqing who fought for the right to choose for her. 2 years later, it was her who fought for the right to choose for herself. Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Since you want to learn so much, Daddy will teach you everything I know. However, cultivation has to be done step by step. How about this? Grandpa has a set of martial arts called Qin's Cloud Hands. Not only Aunt knows it, even Mommy knows it. Daddy will teach you this first, okay? Qin's Cloud Hands? Nianyan lay in Chunshi's arms, wrinkling her nose as she repeated this word. Then, with a face full of suspicion, she asked, Is Qin's Cloud Hands more powerful than Arhut Fist? Of course. Look at how powerful Aunt is. Doesn't she also practice this martial art? Okay, then I'll learn this. Let's go. Daddy will teach you this supreme martial art. Daddy believes. The day you complete your studies will be the day you become famous throughout the world. Time flew. Soon another month had passed. During this time, Nianyan spent the rest of her time diligently learning Qin's Cloud Hands. Other than going to school as usual. This time, Chunshi took out something that could really fight. It was different from the chi refinement method from before. Speaking of which, learning martial arts was really hard work, at least 10,000 times harder than quietly meditating and refining chi. But the strange thing was, not only did Nian not feel that it was hard, but she also enjoyed it every day. If it wasn't for the agreement between father and daughter that she couldn't secretly practice at school, she would have already mastered the entire set of Qin's cloud hands. Seeing Nian working so hard, Chunxi was gratified, but he couldn't help but worry. In terms of cultivation, this child wasn't as free and undisciplined as him, nor was she as carefree as her mother. Instead, she was like Qin Xueqing, obsessed and fanatical? Could it be Nian would also be a martial arts maniac in the future? When he thought of Qin Xueqing's behavior that no man liked, there was only one thought left in Chunxi's mind. Chapter 552. In this crisp autumn September, we welcome the autumn sunshine and the season of harvest, welcoming the cheerful and exciting school sports meet. Early in the morning, all the teachers and students of the school came to the sports field. Under the guidance of the teachers, some of the students arranged the venue, some of them tidied up their clothes, and some of them set up the sports equipment. Everyone was extremely busy, causing the originally quiet sports field to suddenly become lively. As the principal announced the start of the sports meet, the capital-affiliated primary school also officially ushered in the new autumn sports meet. Ah, look! The moment the passionate athletes' marching song sounded, one class after another lined up neatly and strode toward the rostrum. They were all wearing bright clothes with smiles on their faces. They were full of vitality as they strode with their heads held high. They exuded the unique vitality of youth. On this day, October 15th, the National Day holiday had just ended. A few days after the children returned to school, the school officially announced the date of the autumn sports meet. Was there going to be a sports meet again? For the children, the sports meet was as important as Children's Day. This also meant that the children, who had just finished the National Day holiday, could play freely for 3 days. How could the children not be excited? As a famous key primary school in the country, once the autumn sports meet was held, the TV station would immediately send reporters to interview the students. At the same time, the district leaders would also lead a team to participate in the opening ceremony of the sports meet. Although the reporters and district leaders only showed their faces and left, to the students of the school, being able to show their faces on TV was obviously a very glorious and important matter. So, how could they show their faces in front of the leaders? The simplest way was to be the host of the opening ceremony of the sports meet. In addition to taking on the role of announcing the opening ceremony, the host also had to stand on the rostrum and make a declaration of sportsmanship. Therefore, the popularity of this position was even higher than that of the captain of the young pioneers. Nian was now the big sister of the 6th grade. Previously, due to her lack of qualifications, she had not been able to take on such a good job. Now that she finally had enough experience, the moment she took on this beautiful task, Nian wrote a 1,500-word opening speech. Then, she read it in a cadence in front of all the teachers and students. She was not afraid at all, because she knew her father would definitely be on time in front of the TV and watch her shine on stage. I declare. This year's autumn sports meet of the capital-affiliated primary school. Now, let's begin. Following Nian's command, the field suddenly burst into an earth-shattering cheer. Seeing all the teachers and students in the school fall into a state of almost fanatical excitement, Nian couldn't help but have a sweet smile on her face. She really liked this kind of lively feeling. Unfortunately, the announcer and host didn't have to participate in the competition, so she couldn't show off her skills on the stage. Although it was just a small primary school sports meet, under the arrangement of the teachers, this year's autumn sports meet was held decently. Regardless of whether it was the field competition, track competition, or fun competition, other than the more competitive individual events, the teachers did not forget to arrange a series of group competitions. This not only emphasized the sportsmanship of friendship first and competition second, but also allowed the children to understand what true unity was. The competition was in full swing. The first day was the track competition, the second day was the field competition, and the third day was the group competition. Although the group tug-of-war held at the end successfully pushed the atmosphere of the sports meet to the peak, this also meant that this year's autumn sports meet was about to come to a successful end. On the rostrum, Nian took out the closing speech she had prepared and was about to announce the successful end of this year's autumn sports meet. However, the principal suddenly came to her side and directly grabbed the microphone from her hand. Hey, students, quiet down, I have something important to announce. Just now, I received a notice from the higher-ups. This year's autumn sports meet will add an additional competition event, so the end of the autumn sports meet will be postponed for 2 days. As for the competition content, I'll keep you guessing for now, I'll tell you tomorrow. Okay, that's it for today. Students, go home and have a good rest. Come back tomorrow to participate in the competition. Speaking of this, the principal suddenly paused and then continued with a serious face. Teachers of all grades and classes, gather at the big conference hall at 7 o'clock in the evening. I have something important to announce here. Following the principal's inexplicable speech, the autumn sports meet, which was supposed to end, was unexpectedly postponed for 2 days. They could play for 2 more days. While the children were happy, they were also intrigued by the additional competition content mentioned by the principal. Therefore, early the next morning, all the teachers and students of the school waited on the field as early as a few days ago. Everyone was eagerly waiting for the principal to officially unveil the mystery. What kind of competition was it? Why was it so mysterious? Okay, is everyone here? Now I announce. The first martial arts competition of the capital-affiliated primary school officially begins. Now please introduce the rules of the competition to the students of each class. Registration will begin in half an hour. After hearing the words martial arts competition, there was a sudden burst of exclamations on the field. Even before the teacher explained, many of the senior children had already reacted. Martial arts competition? Wasn't it just for them to fight? Was this also a competition? In fact, the reason why the principal did not publicly announce today's competition content yesterday was to prevent the children from going home and telling their parents, which would cause conflict among their parents. After all, a martial arts competition was not the same as a running race. Although the school had already prepared combat protective clothing, in this kind of close combat situation, even with protective clothing, the school could not guarantee that the children would not be injured. Therefore, the principal knew that parents would never agree to let their children participate in this kind of competition. But the higher-ups asked him to take this opportunity to successfully hold a perfect martial arts competition, so as to set a new example for the country's primary and secondary schools. As long as the capital-affiliated primary school organized this martial arts competition beautifully, it would naturally be much easier for the Wu Lian to promote martial arts competitions to the whole country. The principal was caught in the middle and in a dilemma. In the end, he had to make such a decision to act first and report later. In short, just hold the competition first. Wasn't it just a martial arts competition? Have you watched a taekwondo competition? How could children have the strength to be injured wearing protective clothing? Anyway, as long as no children were injured, he would have a way to appease the angry parents. What? You said the family head was not satisfied with the school's arrangement? You want to complain to the Education Bureau? You are not satisfied no matter how I explain? If you are not satisfied, you can drop out. Chapter 553. Because it was the first time the school held a martial arts competition, the principal held an emergency discussion yesterday. The topic of the discussion was naturally the slightly different martial arts competition today. Since the school had no relevant experience in undertaking it, they would have to find their way to do it. Only by doing this beautifully and properly could the capital-affiliated elementary school live up to its title as the National Exemplary Elementary School, and continue to set a new example for the nation's primary and secondary schools. There was no other way. Who asked the higher-ups to give such an important task to the capital-affiliated elementary school? The burden on their shoulders was indeed heavy. The principal felt that the task was heavy, but the teachers felt that the task was a little hot. After all, this was not a track and field competition. Although martial arts had been particularly popular in the past 2 years, and most of the children in the class had signed up for the martial arts training class. The teachers were still a little uncertain if they really wanted to compete. Even if the child succeeded in winning the first place, after the parents received the news, they might immediately chase to the school, and then make a fuss about it, and insist that the teacher give an explanation. Why should my child participate in such a dangerous competition? What if the child is injured? A martial arts competition? Isn't it just a fight? Which school encourages children to fight? Ordinary teachers at most received a fixed salary. How would they dare to easily offend the parents? Therefore, when the principal announced the official start of the martial arts competition, the teachers of each class carefully explained the content discussed in yesterday's meeting to the children. During this time, the teachers even explicitly and implicitly emphasized that no one was forced to participate in this martial arts competition. Everything was voluntary. Even if no one in the class signed up for the competition, the teachers would not feel embarrassed at all. Instead, they would be secretly happy. No one participated, which meant that no one would be injured. It saved them a lot of trouble and worry. How good was that? However, what the teachers never expected was the children's enthusiasm for this martial arts competition was far beyond their imagination. In the class with the most applicants, there was even a situation where the whole class wanted to sign up. Whether it was a boy or a girl, regardless of age, regardless of introverted or not, all the children who had participated in the martial arts training class raised their right hand high at that moment. Even the little girl, who had always been well-behaved and clever after hearing the teacher ask, "If you want to sign up, please raise your hand," she actually raised her little hand at the first moment. The teacher was stunned. Why was it so different from what they imagined? Were the children nowadays so violent? Were they not afraid of being beaten at all? Chen Yan, put your hand down. The martial arts competition is held between people of the same grade. Look at that small body of yours. Who can you beat on the stage? You're not allowed to participate. It's settled then. All right, a class can only have a maximum of 5 participants. Now I will choose the participants. Seeing that the situation was getting out of control, the teacher decisively decided to have the final say and stripped Nian of her right to participate in the competition. When Nian heard this, she pouted unhappily and retorted, "Teacher, I know martial arts. I will be the Qin Shi Yin hand. Dad taught me. It's even more powerful than our Hut fist." As soon as he said this, the whole class burst into laughter. As the old saying goes, there is no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. If they were to compare academic results, Nian would claim second place, and no one in the class would dare to claim first place. However, if it was a martial arts competition, the entire class would not accept her as the class monitor. Nian was only 9 years old. Everyone in the class was 2 or 3 years older than her, but they couldn't outdo her in terms of academics, and they couldn't even beat her in fights? Who would be able to take this lying down? No one took Nian seriously, and this made her very angry. However, just as Nian was about to continue speaking and fight for herself, a discordant voice suddenly sounded from the back of the classroom. "Teacher, why don't we let Li Tangyue participate? Look at her body. If she stood on the stage, she would be able to kill someone just by sitting down, right?" Ha 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 ha. As soon as these humiliating words came out, the entire class burst into laughter. The teacher was stunned for a moment, and did not reprimand her immediately. Instead, she subconsciously thought about the possibility. That's right. Didn't children fight to see who had the bigger body? Li Tangyue's body was indeed quite intimidating. If it were other mischievous children with Li Tangyue's body type, the teacher would definitely send them to the competition without hesitation. However, with Li Tangyue's introverted and almost depressed personality, sending her to the martial arts competition was equivalent to sending her to the execution ground. Therefore, the child who made this suggestion had ulterior motives. She clearly wanted to see Li Tangyue make a fool of herself. Thinking of this, the teacher finally came back to her senses, so she deliberately pretended to be angry and scolded sternly. "Who said this? Stand up for me." The teacher originally just said it casually and wanted to intimidate the children in the class. Who would have thought? As soon as she finished speaking, a tall girl directly stood up and said proudly, "Teacher, I said it." Zhao Yu? The teacher still had a deep impression of this girl who looked quite likable. Zhao Yu started school late and was now 12 years old. In addition, girls developed early, so she was already a little lotus flower that showed its sharp edges. It was very obvious that she was different from the other girls in the class. When the others were still girls, Zhao Yu was the first to transform into a young girl. As a rebellious girl who started putting on makeup in elementary school, Zhao Yu naturally did not like ugly fat women like Li Tangyue. Therefore, Zhao Yu used to tease Li Tangyue a lot. It was not until Nianyan joined grade 6 class 2 and stood up for Li Tangyue that Zhao Yu chose to give up for a period of time. Sometimes the hatred between girls came so easily. Nianyan never provoked anyone. However, her performance, her grades, her looks, and her behavior, it was very easy to attract hatred. Zhao Yu hated Li Tangyue to begin with, but now Qin Yan had suddenly appeared. This was great. The hatred in Zhao Yu's heart naturally doubled. Double kill. Teacher, I want to sign up. Because I have already obtained the warrior certification, and am now a stage 1 warrior. Just like Taekwondo, in the process of promoting the martial arts trend, the Wu Lian did not forget to come up with a set of very scientific martial arts evaluation criteria. Among them, stages 1, 2, and 3 were beginner warriors, stages 4, 5, and 6 were intermediate warriors, and stages 7, 8, and 9 were advanced warriors. Although stage 1 was just the beginning, it was enough to scare many people. After all, Zhao Yu was only a 12-year-old girl. The strength of a stage 1 warrior was enough for her to beat the entire grade. Oh, you have a warrior rank? Okay, then I'll count you in. After hearing Zhao Yu's self-report, the teacher was suddenly happy and seemed to have forgotten to pursue the matter. It couldn't be helped. Who asked this Zhao Yu's background to be not simple? The daughter of a rich family in Beijing. Can't afford to offend. Seeing that the teacher was no longer pursuing the matter, Nianyan could not help but look up at Li Tangyue in the front row. As usual, this big fat girl was bent over the table at this moment, as if she did not hear the mocking laughter just now. Not sure if it was because Chen Shi taught her the Qin Shi Yun hand, but Nianyan's personality was becoming more and more like Qin Shi etchings. Therefore, after looking at Li Tangyue in front of her, and then looking back at Zhao Yu behind her, her bad temper came up on the spot. Teacher, I'm also a stage 1 warrior. Why can she participate but I can't? Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 554. Teacher, I'm also a first stage martial artist. Why can she participate but I can't? Nianyan's clear questioning voice suddenly sounded in the classroom. The teacher's face slightly changed on the spot. This child. How could she be so disobedient? The reason why the teacher didn't allow Nianyan to participate in the martial arts tournament was out of good intentions. He didn't think that this little girl would act like she ate the wrong medicine today, insisting on standing up to make him unable to back down. I'll say it again, this martial arts tournament is held between the same grade. You're already in the 6th grade, so your opponents are at least 2 or 3 years older than you. Are you sure you want to participate? The teacher's face was a bit ugly, but because of Nianyan's usual performance, the teacher didn't care about her contradicting behavior, and once again emphasized the cruelty of the martial arts tournament. He tried to persuade Nianyan to give up this inexplicable idea. After all, children can't be compared to adults. A 2 or 3 year age gap will directly cause the two sides to never be on the same level. Professional boxing matches are divided into lightweight and heavyweight weight, but this martial arts tournament, because of the lack of experience, did not pay attention to the details. As long as Nianyan signed up for the tournament, it means that she may meet Zhao Yu, who is taller than her, heavier than her, and even have longer arms and legs than her. Isn't this just looking for abuse? The teacher really didn't want Nianyan to participate, but this time Nianyan was like a tortoise that ate a scale, determined to participate in the tournament. Teacher, I'm sure. Hearing Nianyan's resolute answer, the teacher frowned and thought for a while, then finally agreed to her request. Okay, then I'll count you in. The teacher thought that Nianyan really had the strength of a first-stage martial artist. But in fact, Nian didn't even go to a martial arts training class. Where can she find a martial artist qualification certificate? This little girl lied. She learned how to lie. And the reason why Nian did this, on one hand, was because she really wanted to participate. On the other hand, it was entirely because of Xiao Yu. Just like how Xiao Yu was unhappy with her, Nian had been unhappy with Xiao Yu for a long time. In Nian's eyes, Li Tangyue was a kind and pitiful girl. She was just a little fatter. Did she get in anyone's way? Why did she have to be bullied every day? Although the whole class was ostracizing Li Tangyue, after Nian's observation during this period of time, she found that there were only a few people who were taking the lead. One of them was Xiao Yu. What was even more infuriating was that Xiao Yu's bullying methods were much better than Skinny Monkey's. At most, Skinny Monkey would take the lead to kick up a fuss. He didn't really hate Li Tangyue. However, Xiao Yu didn't know what was going on. It was as if Li Tangyue's existence would lower her beauty, so she spent all day thinking of ways to target Li Tangyue. Even if she unintentionally passed by Li Tangyue, Xiao Yu would unintentionally leave behind one or two sarcastic words to hurt Li Tangyue's fragile heart. As the saying goes, hurtful words were like sharp knives. The person who said it was calm and indifferent, but the person who heard it was covered in cuts and bruises. In school, this kind of sharp-tongued girl was the most difficult to deal with. It was fine if she called out her name, but she didn't do that. There were a few times when Nian was on the verge of exploding, but in the end, she forced herself to hold it in. There was no other way. She really couldn't find anything that could be used against Xiao Yu, so she couldn't stand up for Li Tangyue. Looking at Li Tangyue's increasingly depressed mental state, Nian felt that she needed to properly vent her anger for her. Xiao Yu Chen Nian, who else in our class is a first-stage warrior? Wang Xiaohu you too. Okay, then the three of you will go together. Xiao Yu and Nian were both girls, so the teacher looked left and right. In the end, he chose the strongest boy among the children who raised their hands. After the class teachers submitted their class's contestants, the school quickly came up with a decent competition schedule. To be honest, the enthusiasm of the children was a bit out of the principal's expectations. He originally thought that there wouldn't be enough participants for this competition, but the result was completely different from what he imagined. If it weren't for the teachers who noticed that something was wrong and promptly asked the principal to limit the number of participants, the number of people who signed up would have increased by several times. Okay, all the teachers of each class have received the competition schedule, right? I now announce that the first martial arts competition of the capital-affiliated primary school officially begin. Referees, please take your positions. Following the principal's order, a dozen or so temporary martial arts instructors took on the role of referees for this martial arts competition. Because of their age, children under the 3rd grade didn't need to compete. They only needed to perform a complete set of Arhut fists, and the referees would score them based on their performance. The one with the highest score would be the champion. This kind of competition naturally wasn't worth watching. Therefore, when the 4th grade students went on stage, the atmosphere was instantly pushed to the peak. The school found a lot of gymnastics mats and neatly spread them on the field, suddenly turning the field into a huge open-air arena. The small players wore full protective suits and were eager to try. Under the leadership of the teachers in charge of their classes, they were madly cheering for them. From the Colosseum of Rome 2,000 years ago to the boxing ring now, fighting had always been the most exciting competition for the audience. Perhaps it was because of the atmosphere. These 8 or 9-year-old children showed a kind of fanatical ferocity as soon as they went on stage. As soon as the referee blew the whistle, the two sides would immediately pounce on each other and use their ancestral tortoise fists. After 2 or 3 moves, the two would hug each other and roll around on the mats. This was a fight between children. As for things like Arhut fists, moves, and so on, sorry, these all didn't exist. Anyway, everyone was wearing protective suits, and the fists didn't hurt. So there was only one way to determine the winner, and that was, either you press me to the ground and can't get up, or I press you to the ground and can't get up. It was supposed to be a martial arts competition, but in the blink of an eye, it turned into a wrestling competition. Looking at the child's red face and the adorable look of wanting to fall down, the teachers could finally put down their worried hearts. It turned out that they were overthinking. These children all had small arms and legs, so how could they perform any decent martial arts moves? If someone could perform a set of tortoise fists smoothly, they would probably be able to take home the championship trophy. Chapter 555. Although the Arhut fist could be considered a martial art with killing power, there were only a few people who could truly master it through a comprehensive study of its martial arts. In fact, this is the same as learning the piano. The piano was born in 1700 and has a history of more than 300 years. But until today, how many people in the world can play the piano, and how many people are proficient in the piano? Therefore, in just a few years, no matter how turbulent the momentum of the martial arts craze is, ordinary people without the guidance of a master, and without the relevant experience can only put on a show at most. There are still too few people who can really rely on their talent and self-learning. And even adults can't use the true power of Arhut fist, let alone these children who are less than 10 years old. So, the capital-affiliated primary school's first martial arts competition turned into a farce. Looking at the children on the stage, the teachers couldn't help but shake their heads and laugh. The children did try very hard. At least their starting positions were decent. But when it came to the real fight, their silly and cute appearance didn't make people feel threatened at all. It has to be said, the way they fight seriously is really too cute. In the end, the 4th grade's championship trophy was won by a little fatty, relying on his physical advantage. As soon as the 4th grade's competition ended, it was the 5th grade's turn to go on stage. It can be seen that there is still a big difference between the 4th grade and the 5th grades. Especially when it comes to making moves, the 5th grade's children can already make a gorgeous combination of straight punches and leg sweeps. Although they still can't use the 3 sunflower style to catch the 8th grade's gorgeous combo. As the contestants get older and older, the level of excitement of the competition begins to rise. Until the first child with the title of first stage martial artist came on stage, the atmosphere was suddenly pushed to the highest point. What is the first stage martial artist's rating standard? That is to be able to make a complete set of Arhut fist in actual combat. It's not some tortoise fist, nor is it a random fight, but a real punch and kick, thoroughly using Arhut fist in actual combat. As the saying goes, 7 stars of Arhut, step by step ding ding. Moving left and rushing right, fast as the wind, left and right meteors rushing to the chest. Don't go up, don't go down. Hammer in the center, become 8 trigrams. 2 hands out of the chest, gods and ghosts don't dare to come. As more and more martial artists entered the stage, the children who were only fighting based on their primitive instincts were quickly defeated. The 5th grade competition was already quite valuable, so the teachers couldn't help but have more expectations for the 6th grade children. They only hoped to see an exciting battle between dragons and tigers. For this reason, the principal had even transferred 2 cameramen to record this year's martial arts competition in all aspects. She only hoped that the 6th grade children's performance would not disappoint her. The result was just as everyone expected. Because their minds were more mature, the 6th grade children's punches were naturally much smoother than those of the lower grades. Their moves were also more methodical. Finally, it was the turn of the contestants from Year 6 Class 2 to take the stage. Zhao Yu was in front of Nian Nian, and her appearance brought the atmosphere to a climax. A girl. She was the first girl to go on stage. Moreover, Zhao Yu's figure was tall, and her chest was slightly bulging. Therefore, the moment she went on stage, the boy opposite her immediately blushed and didn't dare to look at her again. What needs to be mentioned here is, because of the intentions of the teachers of each class, there were basically no girls participating in this year's martial arts competition. The lack of participants also caused the competition to be unable to split into male and female groups, so Nian Nian and Zhao Yu's opponents were both boys. Different from Nian Nian's immaturity, Zhao Yu's body already had a bit of the unique charm of a young girl. Children nowadays matured early, and because of her wealthy family background, Zhao Yu secretly learned how to put on makeup a long time ago on the internet. Although her makeup skills were not very good, compared to a group of primary school students, she was still too dazzling. Therefore, when Zhao Yu went on stage, Many of the brats in the audience seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, and shouted excitedly. Year 6 Class 1 Lu Hao, please advise. Year 6 Class 2 Zhao Yu, please advise. Under the guidance of the referee, the two children bowed to each other and introduced themselves, and Zhao Yu made the first move. Although the boy was also a Dan warrior, he seemed to adhere to the concept of a straight man who did not hit a woman. Even when Zhao Yu used a standard set of punches and kicks, he still did not have the slightest intention of fighting back. Seeing this, Zhao Yu was not surprised at all, and instead took advantage of the situation to attack fiercely. She suddenly bent down, and with a sweep of her leg kicked the boy directly to the ground, then jumped up high, and at the same time, bent her elbow to fiercely punch the boy's chest with the tip of her elbow. Stop! When the referee felt that something was wrong, he sternly shouted to stop, but the boy was already lying on the ground holding his chest and groaning in pain. Although he was wearing protective gear, Zhao Yu's somersault punch still hurt him. Zhao Yu victory. After confirming that the boy's injury was not serious, the referee announced the result of the competition. Then, under the admiring gaze of the crowd, Zhao Yu slowly walked down the stage. Obviously, Zhao Yu's fierce performance not only did not scare the audience, but it also refreshed everyone's understanding of their goddess. Goddess can only be admired from afar but not touched. After Zhao Yu, it was Nianyan's turn to go on stage. If Zhao Yu was compared to a cold and arrogant goddess, then Nianyan was obviously the harmless little girl next door. Year 6 Class 1 Hao Jia, please enlighten me. Year 6 Class 2 Chen Yan, please enlighten me. Following Nianyan's self-introduction, there was a sudden burst of cheers from the audience. Class monitor, do your best. You're the best. Chen Yan, Chen Yan, Chen Yan. Nianyan looked back, and only then did she realize that the people cheering for her were the classes that she used to be in. For example, the former Year 1 Class 1, the current Year 3 Class 2, the former Year 3 Class 2, the current Year 5 Class 2. Although she was now the class monitor of Year 6 Class 2, these former classmates obviously did not forget the class monitor who shone like a comet. Nianyan skipped 2 grades, but who would have thought that she would become the most popular child in the school because of this? Humph. Seeing so many people cheering for Nianyan, Zhao Yu immediately snorted in anger. But soon, a strange smile appeared on her face. Didn't Chen Yan like to be in the limelight? Then let's see how she will embarrass herself on stage later. What a coincidence. Zhao Yu's boyfriend was the boy named Hao Jia in front of her. The two of them came from the same courtyard, and their family backgrounds were not comparable to ordinary people. Moreover, both of their parents had a good relationship, so the two of them naturally got together. Zhao Yu had mentioned Nianyan to Hao Jia before, so she knew very well Hao Jia would definitely stand up for her. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 556. There were many spectators for today's martial arts competition. In addition to the entire school's teachers and students, as well as the temporarily hired cameraman, Chen Shi also secretly came to the scene to watch the battle. After all, how could a broadcast be as exciting as watching a battle live? This was Nianyan's first battle, so of course, Chen Shi had to personally come to the scene to cheer for his daughter. Therefore, while the students were cheering for Nianyan, Chen Shi's figure appeared out of thin air on the roof of the teaching building next to the field. Meow, sensing Chen Shi's arrival, Big Cat immediately jumped down from the treetop. Then, as if possessed by Spider-Man, it ran perpendicularly along the wall to the roof. After arriving at the roof, Big Cat jumped onto Chen Shi's shoulder. Then, like before, it licked its paws and then laid on Chen Shi's shoulder to take a nap. It seemed that it really couldn't arouse the slightest bit of interest in the jostling between children. Hey, did Nianyan grow taller again? Chen Shi casually stroked Big Cat's smooth and soft fur. Only then did he realize that Nianyan seemed to have grown taller again. Even among the 6th graders, she wasn't considered short. This child, will she grow taller than her father in the future? While Chen Shi was busy studying his daughter's height problem, Nianyan welcomed the first battle of her life. Speaking of which, her opponent was not a cat or a dog. Instead, it was a well-known figure. If Nianyan's reputation came mostly from her outstanding performance, then Hao Jia's was the exact opposite, because his reputation came mostly from the misdeeds he committed in his daily life. This was a troublesome brat, or you could also call him delinquent. Hao Jie started school late, and had just turned 12 years old, but he had already learned the ways of society from who knows where. When other people were still addicted to Mobile Legends, this kid was already smoking, drinking, and dating. He really won at the starting line of life. However, being rebellious was being rebellious. In the end, Hao Jie was only a 12-year-old boy, so his relationship with Zhao Yu was more like a special relationship of mutual recognition and cooperation. Both of them hoped to use this opportunity to show their uniqueness and arouse the envy and admiration of their classmates. This would satisfy their desire to win. The moment Hao Jie heard the name Chen Nian, he remembered what Zhao Yu once said to him. Although in Hao Jie's eyes, Nian Nian was obviously a little girl, but as Zhao Yu's boyfriend, Hao Jie felt obligated to stand up for his girlfriend. Therefore, after he went on stage, he gave Nian Nian a fierce middle finger. Obviously, this action was done specifically for Zhao Yu to show his determination. In addition, Hao Jie also wanted to use this opportunity to scare Nian Nian. It would be best if Nian Nian lowered her head and admitted defeat. This way, he wouldn't be criticized for bullying girls, and at the same time, he could get back his girlfriend's dignity. Compared to Hao Jie's fierceness, Nian Nian's reaction was a little cute. Although she didn't understand why Hao Jie was so hostile to her, she knew what it meant to give her the middle finger. Therefore, Nian Nian pouted unhappily. Match start. The referee didn't notice Hao Jie's little action. When he saw that the two young contestants were in position, he blew the whistle. The match started. In front of the entire school, Hao Jie still had some restraint. Therefore, he didn't immediately rush towards Nian Nian. Instead, he stood on the spot and waved at Nian Nian. Seeing this, Nian Nian didn't hold back. She only heard a "Aya" to boost her courage, and then stupidly rushed towards Hao Jie. Here's what needs to be mentioned for safety reasons. The school forced every child to wear boxing gloves. Nian Nian had always been practicing palm techniques, so when she got close to Hao Jie, she stupidly used her fist instead of her palm, and directly threw a punch towards Hao Jie's face. Aya, this silly child. Didn't you see that he was already in a blocking stance? She actually went to feed others moves like this? As the most discerning spectator, Chen Shi sat on the rooftop, stroking Big Cat while commenting on Nian Nian's moves. Sure enough, before Chen Shi finished, Hao Jie raised his left arm to block Nian Nian's fist. At the same time, he swung his right fist and punched towards Nian Nian's lower abdomen. This move was the fourth style of Arhut fist. Clear the clouds and see the sun. Because she was wearing protective clothing, Nian Nian didn't suffer any damage from Hao Jie's punch, but the judges on the platform all took out pens to record it. Like all sports, the judges would give points based on the child's performance, and the one with the higher score would win. Because Nian Nian could still stand, the judge didn't immediately blow the whistle, but instead signaled for both sides to continue the competition. Hao Jie seemed to have some experience in martial arts competitions. Therefore, before Nian Nian could recover, he immediately withdrew his fist, and then kicked the outside of Nian Nian's calf. This was good. Even though she was wearing protective gear, Nian Nian still fell to the mat because of her unstable center of gravity. Whoosh! After the sharp whistle sounded, Hao Jie immediately stopped and took 3 steps back. He had successfully knocked down his opponent. According to the referee's scoring rules, this kick should be worth 3 points, right? Chen Nian, can you still stand? Do you want to admit defeat? The judge quickly stepped forward to help Nian Nian up, and at the same time asked with concern. She was a child, after all, it was normal for her to admit defeat. However, when Nian Nian heard the judge's question, she immediately pouted and replied unhappily, "No. I can stand up, I didn't lose." After saying that, the little girl seemed to have eaten gunpowder. She immediately got up from the ground and got into a fighting stance again. Okay, then be careful, don't get hurt. The judge gestured for both of them to stand properly, ready to start the competition again. But at this time, Nian Nian suddenly did something unexpected. She quickly put the glove on her mouth and took it off in a few moves. What are you doing? Put the gloves on. The judge noticed Nian actions and immediately scolded her. Hearing this, not only did Nian not listen to the judge's request, but she also deliberately threw the gloves out of the ring, retorting at the same time. No. I don't know the Arhut fist. Dad taught me palm techniques. I can't use palm techniques with the gloves on. Palm techniques? The judge was also a martial artist. After hearing what the little girl said, he immediately looked at the main stage hesitantly. This was a rule set by the school. Wearing gloves was to prevent the child from getting hurt. But martial arts and boxing were different after all. Martial arts not only consisted of fist techniques, but also finger techniques and palm techniques, so wearing gloves was equivalent to wearing shackles. On the main stage, after the judge's explanation, the principal finally understood the crux of the matter, so he nodded to the audience and readily agreed to the little girl's request not to wear gloves. The principal wanted to see what was so special about this little girl's palm techniques. Okay, let the competition begin again. Listen to my whistle. 1, 2, 3, whoosh. Chapter 557. Why didn't Chun-Shi directly teach Nian sword techniques and immortal methods, but let her start from practicing martial arts like an ordinary person? That was because Chun-Shi didn't want Nian to become too different. Perhaps many people couldn't understand this point of view, but as long as you put yourself in his shoes, it was actually very easy to understand. Humans were social creatures. Chun-Shi was no exception, and Nian was no exception. If a person didn't have friends, then how lonely would she be? That kind of loneliness that always lingered in one's heart could sometimes actually kill a person. Like other children, Nian also had many friends. Xiaoyu grew up in the same courtyard, the twin brothers grew up on the same street, and then Li Sanduo and Li Tangyue, who were in the same class. Chun-Shi was old. Nian was still very young. Her friends would only increase. However, how many of her friends could keep up with her fast pace? They were clearly good friends who grew up together. In the blink of an eye, Nian, with the halo of a genius, jumped one level after another in school. Nian was already in the 6th grade. The two brothers who were once close to her were now still in the 3rd grade. This change was not obvious at first, but as Nian gradually adapted to the life of the 6th grade, and began to try to integrate into this new environment, it was destined that she had to say goodbye to her yesterday. The once close relationship was now gradually drifting apart. It was not because someone had changed again. It was because everyone had grown up again. Compared to the long life of an immortal cultivator, the ignorant childhood was too short and precious. Chun-Shi didn't want to deprive Nian of her childhood with the inherent concept of cultivating as early as possible, because this would only lead to the loss of a child's childhood. Thinking about it carefully, wasn't Chun-Shi etching a typical case of childhood loss? Sister, come on, beat him down. In the crowd, the two brothers didn't care about the strange gazes of the surrounding students at all, and cheered for Nian at the top of their lungs. The two of them had already shouted loudly enough. However, Nian was so focused that she didn't hear the two brothers' shouts at all. This was the first time she had fought with someone. It was obviously impossible to say that she wasn't nervous in her heart. Therefore, after taking off the gloves on her hands, Nian immediately followed Chun-Shi's usual teachings, and directly assumed the posture of an elbow wrap. What was cloud hand? In ancient scrolls often used a spiral shape to represent the rotation of clouds in the wind. There was also a very elegant combination of hand in the classic dance. This set of skills was a combination of painting and dance moves, so it was named cloud hand. What needed to be mentioned here was, martial arts was divided into external style and SS external styles focused arts hand. There was no superiority and inferiority. S's masters a masters to master. And this was what the older generation often said. Train the muscles, bones and skin externally, and train the breath internally. Most of the Arhut fist's moves were fierce and forceful. It was the standard external style, so how Jiez's attack looked fierce. As the saying goes, once an expert makes a move, the truth will be known. Nian had just assumed hers fighting stance, and the referee's interest was immediately piqued. Looking at her stance, this kid seemed to have some skill? Just now, because the gloves were too much of a hindrance, Nian was defeated by Hao Jie the moment she came up, so she naturally felt a little unconvinced. That round didn't count. Start over. Fighting with a little girl already made Hao Jie feel a little embarrassed. But after the opponent fell, she still put on an unconvinced look, which made Hao Jie feel a little annoyed. Kids at this age were the most prideful. Unconvinced? Then I'll beat you until you're convinced. Hence, the moment the referee's whistle sounded, Hao Jie seemed to have eaten gunpowder and rushed towards Nian. Maybe he wanted to use this to establish his dominance, so Hao Jie didn't use his Arhut fist this time, but took out his famous ultimate move. Flying kick. Hao Jie. Seeing Hao Jie jump high and kick towards Nian, the teachers couldn't sit still. With this kick, wouldn't Nian be sent flying out of the arena? The principal was still watching from above. How could this kid not know his limits? From the moment Hao Jie sped up and jumped to the moment the teachers shouted to stop, everything happened in the blink of an eye. But just when everyone thought that Nian would be sent flying by Hao Jie's kick, an unexpected scene suddenly happened. In actual fact, if her reaction was fast enough, Nian could totally avoid Hao Jie's flashy flying kick. But instead of dodging, she immediately bent her knees and got into a horse stance, then swung her arms like willow branches by the river. It looked messy, but it actually had a deeper meaning. As expected, just when Hao Jie's right leg was about to hit Nian suddenly hugged his right leg, then borrowed the force from Hao Jie's leg to spin in a circle, then threw Hao Jie out of the arena. Ow! Get up! You're crushing my leg! Perhaps it was because Hao Jie used too much force, but after his body fell onto the mat, he rolled a few times on the mat. He only stopped when he hit the audience on the side. Xiao! Hao Jie has gone out of bounds. Nian wins. After the sharp whistle sounded, the referee announced the result of this round's competition. No one would have thought that Hao Jie would lose in such a way. The teachers didn't understand the twists and turns, and only thought that Hao Jie accidentally flew out of the arena because he wanted to look cool. But the referee at the side understood the crux of the matter, so he directly declared Nian the winner. How was this a mistake? In the face of Hao Jie's flying kick, not only did Nian not dodge, he even seized the opportunity at the crucial moment of his opponent's mistake. Taking advantage of the situation, he used Hao Jie's strength to successfully turn it into his own, and threw Hao Jie out of the ring. This was a competition, not a duel. It was based on the performance of both parties. Nian got 1 point for not panicking in the face of danger, 1 point for not dodging, and 1 point for the correct response. But Hao Jie? Not only did he fail to show off, he even fell out of bounds. This kind of performance was basically enough to get a negative score. This was the referee's evaluation criteria. Just based on this move alone, Nian deserved to win. This was a martial arts competition, so naturally one couldn't just compete with brute force, but also with brains. Flying kick in the air? The move was cool, but could it hit someone? The referee had his own evaluation criteria, so after announcing this round's result, he immediately signaled for the next round's contestants to take their places. Although the teachers didn't understand the strength of the move, after hearing the referee's judgment, they still led the crowd in cheering for Nian. They really didn't expect this. This little girl could actually win against Hao Jie. Everyone was congratulating Nian. But at this moment, a very discordant voice suddenly sounded. This isn't fair. There's a conspiracy. The referee blew a black whistle. I don't accept this. Chapter 558. Black Whistle? Upon hearing this, even Nian could not help but turn around to take a look. Wasn't it Hao Jie who was making a ruckus? Looking at how lively and energetic he was, it was no wonder that he would be so indignant. As the leader of the 6th grade class 1, as well as a famous person in school, Hao Jie's words were immediately echoed by many students below the stage. Unfair. Hao Jie did not lose. The referee blew the black whistle. Fight again. That's right, let's fight again. As the members of the 6th grade class 1 stood up to support Hao Jie, the audience's stance changed. That's right, Hao Jie only accidentally rolled off the stage. Why did the referee decide that he had lost? Was there really a conspiracy? Some of the more cowardly children did not dare to stand up and question the referee, but they still hid in the crowd and booed. Seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, the referee in charge of this competition was immediately angered. Xiao. He whistled fiercely and quickly walked to the center of the stage. Looking at the audience below the stage, he scolded sternly, "As a martial artist, how could we do such dirty things behind the scenes?" In this round of competition, Hao Jie has clearly made 3 big mistakes. First, he underestimated his opponent. Second, he was too arrogant. Third, he did not withdraw his move in time to remedy the situation. And after making a mistake, he still insisted on doing it his way. If this was not a competition but a life and death duel, then I can tell you with absolute certainty, Hao Jie, he would be a dead man now. In a battle between experts, victory or defeat was determined by a single move. If it were any other child, the referee might not have been so harsh. But Hao Jie was different. He was a first-stage martial artist with a martial artist certification. But now he had made such a serious mistake in a real battle. And this was something that the referee could not tolerate. After all, martial arts were not child's play. Being strict with children was truly for their own good. Even though Hao Jie did not understand these principles, but after seeing the referee fly into a rage in front of everyone and displaying the unique aura of a martial artist, this kid was like an eggplant that had been hit by frost. Wilted. If you can't afford to offend the referee, then you can only blame yourself for being unlucky. Hao Jie returned to the area where his class was located unhappily. Next door was Year 6 Class 2. Hearing the laughter from the class next door, Hao Jie immediately became angry. What happened? Was he so proud of winning by a fluke? If you have the guts, don't leave after school. Otherwise, I'll definitely beat the crap out of you. Hao Jie was used to riding roughshod over others, so when he saw the skinny monkey's smug look, he immediately grabbed the mineral water beside him and threw it over with all his might. The mineral water bottle hit the skinny monkey's leg, and the skinny monkey immediately stood up angrily. Who threw it? But when he found out that it was Hao Jie who had hit him, he was terrified on the spot. He immediately pretended that nothing had happened and sat back down silently. After scaring the skinny monkey, Hao Jie's mood seemed to have improved a lot. Therefore, he immediately took out his phone and sent a message to Zhao Yu. "Baby, I'm sorry." Zhao Yu was sitting not far away. After seeing the message, she did not reply immediately. Instead, she turned her head and glared at Hao Jie fiercely. It was obvious that Zhao Yu was angry. Since her boyfriend was so useless, she had to do it herself. She only hoped that Chen Nian would not be eliminated so quickly. The competition continued. After Zhao Yu and Nian Nian defeated their respective opponents, the final battle officially began in the first martial arts competition of the capital-affiliated primary school. The cold Zhao Yu versus the cute Chen Nian. No one would have thought that the champion would be between these two girls. Therefore, the moment the two girls appeared on the stage, there was an earth-shattering cheer from the audience. In this round, Chen Nian from Year 6 Class 2 will face Zhao Yu from Year 6 Class 2. Now I announce. The competition officially begins. Looking at the children on the stage, the form teacher of Year 6 Class 2 was so happy that she could not close her mouth. In short, no matter who won this competition, the first and second place would be on the heads of Year 6 Class 2. Therefore, before the two girls started fighting, the form teacher quickly walked to the side of the stage and whispered a few words to them, basically telling them to just do whatever they wanted. After all, they were all on the same side. It did not matter who won first place, right? It had to be said that the form teacher was taking things for granted. Xiao. Hearing the referee's whistle, Zhao Yu seemed to have transformed into a different person. With a cold face, she charged straight at Nian Nian. Zhao Yu was half a head taller than Nian Nian, so when she started fighting, her whole body emitted an extremely oppressive aura. Hey. Although the little girl looked delicate, she seemed to be even more vicious than Hao Jie when it came to fighting. In fact, before she went on stage, Zhao Yu had already made up her mind. Today, in front of everyone, she must teach this annoying girl a lesson. With Hao Jie as an example, there was no way Zhao Yu would give Nian Nian another chance. Hence, she immediately used her best move, Vajra subduing the tiger. Seeing this, Nian remained calm. She immediately faced the direction of Zhao Yu's attack and raised her hand to meet it. The Arhut fist was characterized by its straightforwardness and ferocity. The Qin Shi Yun hand was characterized by its erratic movements and restraint. If one were to talk about the strength of the technique, of course, Qin Clan Yun hand would have the upper hand. However, martial arts were like knives that killed people. A martial arts expert could easily kill hundreds of people with a kitchen knife. A 3-year-old with a dragon-slaying knife might not be able to defeat anyone. The key was to see who was using the knife. Nian had been learning the Qin Shi Yun hand for quite some time. But compared to Zhao Yu, there was a clear difference. Therefore, when Nian raised her hand to block Zhao Yu's Vajra subduing tiger, Zhao Yu immediately used her rich combat experience to change her move and used the Sea Descending Dragon. The so-called Sea Descending Dragon was to take a big step forward to suppress the opponent. At the same time, raise your right fist and smash the opponent's head. When had the audience on stage seen such a vicious move? Therefore, the moment Zhao Yu used this move, there was a burst of exclamations from below the stage. It had to be said that Nian's combat experience was too lacking. Therefore, she did not realize Vajra Tiger subduing Vajra was just a feint. Dragon subduing Sea was Zhao Yu's real killer move. Seeing that the opponent's fist was about to hit her head, she realized that it was too late to change her move. What should she do? She was going to be beaten. Her father did not teach her how to deal with this move. At such a critical moment, Nian had an idea. She stuck out her butt, bent her legs, and suddenly sat on the ground. Only then did she manage to avoid Zhao Yu's fatal punch. Aya, why are you so fierce? Mobile version of the fastest update website. M. Chapter 559. Aya, why are you so fierce? Zhao Yu wasn't the one who said that. Instead, it was Nian who was sitting on the ground. Her current actions were akin to someone who was suddenly pulled out of her seat during class. She took the opportunity to sit down on the ground, barely dodging Zhao Yu's heavy punch. They were classmates, but Zhao Yu was so fierce and decisive. She really didn't treat Nian as one of her own. At that moment, even the audience couldn't help but sweat for Nian. Luckily, Nian was quick-witted enough to defuse this move. Otherwise, if Nian were to take the full brunt of Zhao Yu's punch, even if she was wearing a protective helmet, Nian's vision would probably turn black and she would feel dizzy. Such a fierce and tough style instantly made the atmosphere tense. The homeroom teacher couldn't help but exhort. Friendship first, competition second. We're all classmates. A competition is a competition. You two shouldn't be too serious. The homeroom teacher seemed to think that Zhao Yu was too heavy-handed. However, although Zhao Yu's moves were fierce, there was nothing wrong with her actions. Therefore, when the homeroom teacher advised Zhao Yu to be merciful, it would make people feel that she was biased. The teacher was biased towards Chen Nian? Thinking of this, Zhao Yu suddenly felt uncomfortable. However, she was still a person who cared about her reputation. Seeing Nian sit on the ground, Zhao Yu hesitated for a moment. In the end, she gave up this great opportunity to attack and gave Nian some time to recover. So what if the teacher was biased? This was a competition. Therefore, she had to defeat Chen Nian fair and square in front of everyone. This time, Zhao Yu had to convince everyone wholeheartedly. Yo, why is this child so angry? I guess Nian must have been angry with you a lot. On the rooftop, Chen Shi expressed his opinion as he massaged the big cat. He could tell. This girl named Zhao Yu seemed to have an inexplicable hostility towards Nian. And the source of this hostility should be the so-called jealousy. Although Nian was much younger than Zhao Yu, no matter how one looked at it, Nian was much more outstanding than Zhao Yu, which was why Zhao Yu was hostile towards her. Sometimes, the hatred between girls was just that simple. When you are only a little better than others, others will be jealous of you. But when you are much more outstanding than others, others will envy you from the bottom of their hearts and even see you as a role model. Sometimes people were just so strange. Zhao Yu's grades were not as good as Nian's. Her looks were not as good as Nian's. Even her popularity in school was not as good as Nian's. If Nian didn't sign up today, Zhao Yu could only hold her anger in. However, Nian Yan still wanted to stand out and steal her limelight. How could Zhao Yu tolerate this? Didn't Chen Yan want to be first in everything? Then, today, she would let Chen Yan experience it firsthand. What it meant to be first. Nian Yan started cultivating early, but started learning martial arts late. So, in terms of martial arts strength, Nian Yan was indeed not Zhao Yu's match. Hence, when the two of them got into their stances and started fighting again, Nian Yan could only take 3 of Zhao Yu's attacks before she started to feel a little weak. Big cat, look, isn't Nian Yan angry? In the arena, Nian Yan was slightly exhausted under Zhao Yu's relentless attacks. Outside the arena, Chen Shi acted like nothing had happened and started chatting with Big Cat. Meow. After hearing Chen Shi's words, Big Cat rolled its eyes, as if it was defending Nian Yan. After all, if Chen Shi hadn't placed a seal on Nian Yan's body, even if 100 Zhao Yu attacked together, they obviously wouldn't be a match for Nian Yan. Although Big Cat was a demon, it had its own emotions. After all, it had watched Nian Yan grow up. Therefore, when Big Cat saw that Nian Yan was clearly a little tired from dealing with Zhao Yu's attacks, but had a stubborn and unyielding expression on her face, it immediately wanted to go up and help Nian Yan. How could little Princess Nian Yan lose to such a mean girl? The competition continued. There were no mistakes in this competition, nor were there any out of bounds. There was only a lack of skill. When the referee blew the whistle for the 3rd time to ask Nian Yan if she wanted to admit defeat, Chen Shi finally smiled in satisfaction. Because Nian Yan rejected the referee's suggestion once again. Since she was in the arena, as long as she didn't lose, she would continue to persevere. No, I haven't lost yet. I won't admit defeat. The competition was based on points. As long as Nian Yan was hit by Zhao Yu once more, the result of this competition would be decided. Looking at Nian Yan's stubborn and unconvinced look, Zhao Yu couldn't help but sneer. She was already confident of winning. However, just as she readied herself and was ready to completely end this competition, Chen Shi on the rooftop smiled and snapped his fingers. Pa. At that moment, Chen Shi was like Iron Man wearing the Infinity Glove. He was just short of saying the classic line to Nian Yan himself. I love you 3,000 times. Translation. I love you 3,000 times. In fact, Chen Shi didn't care about the result of this competition at all. No matter who won or lost, it was just a trivial matter to Chen Shi. What he really cared about. In fact, it was Nian Yan's attitude towards this competition. From Nian Yan's eyes, Chen Shi saw the spirit of not admitting defeat. Nian Yan wanted to win. This had nothing to do with personal resentment. It wasn't because she had any vanity or utilitarian heart. It was because she wanted to prove herself through hard work. Nian Yan was constantly knocked down, but she kept getting up. From the beginning to the end, her eyes were so firm. This was the first time Nian Yan fought with someone. Chen Shi could accept her falling, but he couldn't accept that she couldn't get up after falling. Therefore, when Nian Yan firmly said that she hadn't lost, Chen Shi couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. A snap of his fingers. A layer of seal. And this was Nian Yan's real strength. She wanted to win. He had won fair and square, in a grand and glorious manner. Feeling the cool feeling constantly gushing out from her abdomen, Nian Yan suddenly froze in place. This feeling was so strange. It was icy cold. So comfortable thinking of this, Nian Yan couldn't help but reach out and rub her stomach. When she raised her head again, she found that Zhao Yu had rushed in front of her. It was still the same set of moves that she was familiar with. Vajra subduing the tiger. The momentum was overwhelming. But this time, Zhao Yu's movements were like a slow-motion scene with upgraded special effects. Every move was seen by Nian Yan. Therefore, she slowly reached out her left hand and directly grabbed Zhao Yu's right wrist. Then she did what her father usually taught her. She twisted her hips, turned her waist, lowered her elbow and pressed her wrist. This set of movements was like moving clouds and flowing water. She easily grabbed Zhao Yu and threw her aside. Chapter 560. Whoosh! I announce. The winner of this round is Chen Yan. With the sharp whistle, The first martial arts competition of the capital-affiliated primary school finally came to an end. R. A. N. W. N. W. 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 R. A. N. W. E. N. A. C. O. M. Then, Nian Nian was pushed to the rostrum by her homeroom teacher, much to the surprise of all the teachers and students. She looked at the shiny gold trophy in Nian Nian's hands, then at the dull silver trophy in her own hands. At that moment, tears of resentment and unwillingness flowed down Zhao Yu's cheeks. She couldn't accept it. But so what if she couldn't accept it? She had been so close to ending the competition. But just as the winner was about to be revealed, Chen Yan seemed to have taken a stimulant. She exploded with power that could make anyone feel despair. It was terrifying. Zhao Yu would never have thought that, in Nian Nian's small body, there was actually an accumulation of vital essence comparable to that of a foundation establishment cultivator. She had only torn a small crack in the seal. And the true essence that had been accumulated for a long time made Zhao Yu experience what despair was. In the face of absolute power, all techniques were futile. The judges had noticed the change in Nian Nian, but with their current knowledge, they couldn't see through it. So if they really had to find an explanation, they could only choose to believe that Chen Yan had been deliberately hiding her strength. She had won. He had won fair and square, in a glorious manner. Although Nian Nian didn't know why she had won, it didn't affect her good mood. She wanted to give this trophy to her father. Her father would be happy for her. Thinking of this, Nian Nian's smile became even brighter. With the good mood after winning the championship, Nian Nian returned to the classroom happily with the support of a group of students. Now she just had to wait for the teacher to reward her. The teacher had said before that any student who could get a place in the sports meet could make a wish in public, and then the whole class would work together to fulfill it. In short, as long as this wish is not too ridiculous, the teacher will try his best to fulfill it for everyone. It was rare to see the teacher being so generous, so as soon as the students returned to the classroom, they gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and started discussing. As the host of the games, Nian Nian had not participated in any events before. However, she had won the championship in the martial arts competition, so she had a chance to fulfill her wish. Therefore, after the little girl returned to her seat with the trophy, she began to think about what she should wish for later, just like the other students. Do you want snacks? Or do you want toys? Or was it a souvenir? This was the reward Nian Nian deserved for bringing honor to the class, so she naturally had to think about it carefully. But just as she was hesitating, a familiar figure suddenly appeared in front of her and completely disrupted her train of thought. It was Li Tangyue. At this moment, Nian Nian suddenly realized. It seemed that she hadn't seen Li Tangyue for a long time. Where has she been these past few days? Thinking of this, Nian Nian put down the trophy in her hand, then reached out and patted Li Tangyue's arm, and asked with a puzzled expression, "Where have you been these past few days? Why haven't I seen you?" Hearing this, a strange expression flashed across Li Tangyue's face. As if she had just been a thief, she looked around and made sure that no one was paying attention to her. Then she replied hesitantly, "I didn't sign up for the competition, so of course you couldn't see me." Oh, okay." Nian Nian didn't doubt her. After hearing Li Tangyue's answer, she handed the trophy in her hand to Li Tangyue and said proudly, "Look, my trophy. Isn't it beautiful?" Perhaps because the sports meet was held every year, there were no trophies for other events. Only the top 3 of the martial arts competition had trophies. This was the gold trophy that only the champion could have. Although the workmanship was a bit rough, it was special, wasn't it? Didn't Li Tangyue not sign up for the competition? Therefore, Nian Nian wanted to share her happiness with her, so she directly stuffed the trophy into Li Tangyue's hands. "This is the trophy I got after I defeated Zhao Yu. Hers is silver, mine is gold. She was defeated by me. If she dares to bully you in the future, I'll throw this trophy at her face. Humph, I'll anger her to death." Nian Nian hooted with a smug expression. She felt that she had helped Li Tangyue vent her anger. However, after Li Tangyue heard this, the expression on her face was still a little strange. At this time, Nian Nian finally noticed Li Tangyue's abnormality, so she immediately went over and asked with concern, "Li Tangyue? What's wrong with you? Are you feeling unwell? I'm fine. Seeing that Nian was so concerned about her, Li Tongyue's face finally revealed a smile. Thank you, Chen Nian. Seeing that Li Tongyue finally smiled, the smile on Nian's face suddenly became much brighter. Because the homeroom teacher went to the office to collect the award, when the students returned to the classroom, they gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and whispered to each other, so the entire classroom was a little noisy. They were still in class, wasn't they? Therefore, after a few simple words with Li Tongyue, Nian wanted to get up to maintain class discipline. However, at this time, Skinny Monkey-like's voice suddenly sounded from the back door of the classroom. Big news! Big news! Everyone quiet down and listen to me. Skinny Monkey-like's voice was very loud and his expression was very exaggerated. Therefore, as soon as he entered the classroom, he attracted the attention of the entire class. I just saw an announcement on the bulletin board. It was posted by the sports meet inspection team. The announcement said that someone in our class has repeatedly violated discipline. Guess, who is this person? After hearing Skinny Monkey-like's words, a few students immediately asked with righteous indignation, who is it? Isn't this dragging our class down? The sports meet inspection team. As the name implied, it was a special team responsible for maintaining order and inspecting the hygiene of each class during the sports meet. Since the inspection team issued an announcement, it meant that the student who was criticized did indeed make a big mistake. If this wasn't tarnishing the reputation of the class, then what was? Everyone was doing their best for the honor of the class, but this rat shit secretly tarnished the reputation of the class. Who could accept this? Therefore, the students of grade 6 class 2 were like ignited barrels of dynamite, exploding in an instant. Who is it? Who did it? Why aren't you standing up? Skinny Monkey-like hesitated for a moment before suddenly pointing to the front of the classroom. Then he said with certainty, Li Tongyue. She did it. Chapter 561. Li Tongyue. She did it. With Skinny Monkey's shout, the eyes of the entire class suddenly gathered on Li Tongyue. W. Hearing this, Li Tongyue's reaction was the same as usual. She immediately lay on the table like an ostrich. It seemed that she didn't want to give a reasonable explanation. What did she do? Why was she criticized? A few male students were more hot-tempered. They stood up on the spot and questioned. Seeing this, Skinny Monkey immediately put on a look as if it had nothing to do with him. Then he pointed at Li Tongyue's back and said loudly, "How would I know? You guys go ask her." After hearing Skinny Monkey's words, the students' eyes suddenly fell on Li Tongyue. It wasn't that Skinny Monkey was deliberately targeting Li Tongyue, but Li Tongyue's behavior had indeed aroused public anger. As a member of grade 6 class 2, everyone tried their best to fight for the honor of the class during the sports meet. But what was Li Tongyue doing? Not only did she not sign up for any competitions, but she didn't even participate in the group events. Of course, participation in the sports meet was not compulsory, so if Li Tongyue was determined not to participate, no one could force her to sign up. If she didn't sign up, then so be it. At most, they could just pretend that she didn't exist. Li Tongyue was selectively ignored by everyone. But who would have thought that, during this sports meet, not only did Li Tongyue not win any honor for the class, but she also secretly smeared the reputation of the class behind their backs. When everyone's collective sense of honor was at its highest, Li Tongyue made such a mistake that damaged the class's image. How could the students accept this? Therefore, no one knew who took the lead, but a language book suddenly cut through the air and directly hit Li Tongyue's back. Bang! Li Tongyue was lucky. The four corners of the textbook didn't hit her, so it didn't hurt very much. But then countless language textbooks were like a rainstorm. One after another, they were thrown at Li Tongyue. At that moment, Li Tongyue was like a prisoner being paraded on the street, being attacked crazily by her classmates. After the textbooks were thrown, they threw stationery. In any case, they threw whatever was convenient. Damn fat pig. Get out. Our class doesn't welcome you. Scram. Confucius once said, "If he is not my disciple, I will beat the drum and attack him." Li Tangyue was in such a situation now. She was not popular with her classmates to begin with, and she had tarnished the reputation of the class. That was why she was attacked by her classmates like this. Nian was sitting next to Li Tangyue. Perhaps someone's hand accidentally shook, so one of the textbooks that were originally thrown at Li Tangyue suddenly flew to her head. One had to know that Nian was also hot-tempered now. So before the textbook hit her, she reached out and knocked the textbook down. Then she stood up and shouted at the class, "Stop! What are you doing?" Nian flipped out again. But this time, her bravery did not help at all. The students were still throwing things at Li Tangyue and kept shouting that Li Tangyue should be kicked out of class too. Seeing this, Nian didn't know where she got the strength from. But she suddenly slammed her hand on the desk. Bang! The loud sound shocked everyone present. Everyone looked carefully and realized that Nian's desk had been broken by her slap. One had to know that this was not a rotten wooden desk in a village primary school. Chen Nian was actually able to break this iron desk with a single slap? The noisy classroom finally quietened down. For a moment, everyone could not help but keep quiet out of fear. The situation was finally under control. Nian hurriedly glanced at the class before quickly walking to Li Tangyue's side. However, just as she was about to ask if Li Tangyue was injured, the voice of the head teacher suddenly came from outside the classroom. "What are you doing? Whose books are these? Why are they all thrown in the corridor? Do you not want to go to class?" After seeing the textbooks thrown all over the floor, the teacher's face immediately darkened. Therefore, as soon as he walked into the classroom, he slammed the certificate in his hand on the podium. "Speak. What's going on? What were you arguing about just now?" After hearing the teacher's voice, the students who were still excited just now suddenly went silent. At this moment, Zhao Yu's voice suddenly rang out in the silent classroom. "Teacher, Li Tangyue has been criticized by the school." It had to be said that this girl was indeed quite scheming. It was just a simple statement, but not only did it successfully divert the teacher's attention, but it also instantly pulled Li Tangyue back into the spotlight. After saying that, Zhao Yu even glared at Nian as if to show off. However, what Zhao Yu did not expect was, after hearing her words, the teacher only nodded slightly. There was not much reaction on his face. "Yes, I know." It turned out that when he was receiving the certificate in the office just now, the teacher had already heard the news from others. The entire school was criticized. It was not that Li Tangyue stole anything or hit someone during the sports meet. It was because Li Tangyue was unlucky to be caught by the inspection team 3 times in a row. As everyone knew, although they could move freely during the sports meet, they could not leave the class for too long. Perhaps it was because she was too fat. Li Tangyue had always been afraid of participating in the sports meet. Therefore, as soon as the sports meet began, she returned to the classroom alone to hide. This kind of behavior was absolutely not allowed by the school. When the inspection team caught Li Tangyue for the first time, she was fooled by the excuse of taking something. In the end, she was caught by the inspection team again the next day. This time, she could not fool them. After being reprimanded by the inspection team, Li Tangyue did not dare to stay in the classroom anymore. Instead, she hid on the rooftop. She hid like this for 3 days. She could not ask for leave, nor did she dare to show her face. Because as soon as she showed her face, her classmates would laugh and ask her to participate in the shot put event. "You're so fat, you must be very good at throwing shot put, right?" Li Tangyue was really under a lot of psychological pressure. However, the inspection team's teacher did not care about this. Therefore, when she was caught by the inspection team for the 3rd time on the rooftop, the teacher mercilessly recorded the name Li Tangyue in the inspection report. Her behavior was extremely bad, and must be criticized by the entire school. Although Li Tangyue's behavior destroyed the collective image of the 6th grade class too, it also affected the performance of the form teacher. However, from the teacher's point of view, the form teacher could still understand Li Tangyue's behavior, so he did not want to pursue this matter too much. The teacher could understand Li Tangyue's behavior and motivation, but this did not mean that the students could understand. Therefore, after seeing the teacher's indifferent expression, The few students who had been the most vocal immediately stood up with angry faces. "Teacher, can you kick Li Tengyue out of our class? We don't welcome her." Chapter 562. Being ostracized was not a spur of the moment, but an accumulated disgust. Li Tengyue herself did not do anything wrong, but her image had a very bad impact on grade 6 class 2. So much so that when the students in the class went out to the toilet, they might be asked by the students in the next class, "Is there a very, very fat girl in your class?" Perhaps this was just idle chatter, but in the ears of those who heard it, it was no less than a taunt. It was as if Li Tengyue's existence really pulled down the status of the entire class 2 of grade 6. Because of this, many students had been dissatisfied with Li Tengyue for a long time. Big fool. Damn fat woman. Ugly monster. However, scolding was one thing. Li Tengyue was used to being cautious. She would not have conflicts with anyone at all, so the students at most disliked her, but did not rise to the point of shouting and killing. If Nianyan's childhood was colorful, then Li Tengyue's childhood was obviously gray. From the moment she fell ill, she was subconsciously marginalized by everyone. Of course, if she could continue to be marginalized, wouldn't that be a good thing for Li Tengyue? She was not used to being the center of attention, so she was like an ostrich, burying her head in her arms, thinking that she could hide herself this way. But, no matter how Li Tengyue tried to escape, she could not avoid the fact that she was a member of this class. Therefore, from the moment Li Tengyue was criticized by the entire school, she was destined to be abandoned by the collective will. Do not underestimate the will of a collective, especially a collective formed by 11 or 12-year-old children. Li Tengyue had smeared the reputation of the class, so she had to get out of this class. This was a decision made by the collective will, and even the form teacher could not stop it. Therefore, when the first student shouted for Li Tengyue to get out of grade 6 class 2, the classroom, which was originally quiet, suddenly became lively again. "Teacher, quickly chase Li Tengyue out. We don't welcome her. She's too bad." Not only did she not win glory for the class, but she also secretly smeared the reputation of the class. "Our class does not welcome such a person. That's right. Get out." In the end, the students spontaneously shouted in unison, "Li Tengyue, get out! Li Tengyue, get out! Li Tengyue, get out!" This was the power of collective will. The homeroom teacher was over 30 years old this year. In his teaching career, which spanned more than 10 years, was it not rare for a teacher to be kicked out of class by a student? Even a teacher could be chased away, let alone a classmate who wasn't welcomed by the school. The teacher didn't know why Li Tengyue had caused so much public anger. However, as the head teacher of the 6th grade class 2, the teacher still couldn't accept the fact that the entire class was ostracizing one person. Therefore, just as the students were shouting in unison, the teacher suddenly flew into a rage. "All of you shut up. What are you doing? Rebellion." His teacher clearly had a lot of prestige. He knew that he couldn't let this matter continue to fester, so he made a prompt decision to suppress the students' shouts and strictly forbade anyone from mentioning this matter again. "Don't ever mention this again. The award ceremony will begin now. Those whose names are called, please come up to the stage to receive your award immediately." After a round of reprimanding to calm the crowd, the teacher took advantage of the opportunity to use his control skill, changing the topic. The teacher didn't care about the reaction of the students at all. He just picked up the award and directly called out the names. "Wang Bo, the runner-up of this year's 50-meter sprint, come up to the stage to receive your award." After being called out by the teacher, the boy named Wang Bo hesitated for a moment before going up to the stage to receive his award. "What are you all waiting for? Clap." Seeing that the atmosphere wasn't very lively, the teacher took the lead to clap. It had to be said that, the older the ginger, the spicier it was. With this set of changing the topic, and attacking one by one combo, the situation that was originally on the verge of getting out of control was suddenly controlled by the teacher. The award ceremony proceeded in an orderly manner. Everyone seemed to have forgotten what had just happened. Those who received the award, those who applauded clapped, and no one clamored for Li Tangyue to get out of the 6th grade class too. Okay, have you all received your award? Now fill out the award wish card. The money will be paid for by the class, so don't go too far. Let me think. Are you all playing King's Glory? How about this? The student who wins the award can choose any skin that costs less than 888 points of coupon. As for the students who don't play games, they can also choose an item of similar value. What do you think? 888 points of coupon, which was 8 yuan. It wasn't expensive, but it hit the sweet spot of the entire class. What did elementary school students like the most? Wasn't this King of Glory? Therefore, when this proposal came out, the atmosphere was immediately pushed to the climax. This time, the students really forgot about Li Tangyue's incident. They turned to excitedly discuss the contents of the award. What kind of skin should they choose? Guan Yu's Charging War God or Monkey King? The students seemed to be a little excited. They kept scribbling on their wish cards, afraid that they would waste this opportunity. But at this moment, a very discordant voice suddenly sounded in the classroom. Teacher, I don't want a skin, and I don't want a toy. After hearing this voice, the teacher looked up and found that the person who spoke was actually Chen Nian. What? Then what do you want? As the champion of this martial arts competition, Nian Nian naturally received more honor than everyone else. The teacher had previously considered increasing the reward for the champion, but due to the limited class fees, he could only give up on this idea. Like all the winners, Nian Nian also received a chance to fulfill her wish. This wish could be a game skin or a cultural toy. But however, she had made a wish that was different from the others, so much so that everyone, including the teacher, was stunned. Teacher, my wish is, I hope that everyone will stop bullying Li Tangyue. At this point, Nian Nian actually stood up from her seat with a look of excitement. Maybe I shouldn't use the word pitiful to describe her. But she's really pitiful. Why? Why do you all bully her? What did she do wrong? You all said that she brought shame to the class. But if it weren't for you all laughing at her, why would she deliberately violate the school rules and secretly hide in the classroom to be caught by the inspection team? It turned out that while the teacher was giving out the award, Nian Nian understood what happened from Li Tangyue. She heard Li Tangyue's inner voice, so she could empathize with Li Tangyue's experience. All this time, Li Tangyue had been silently enduring everything. She thought that as long as she kept her head down and didn't say anything, all the suffering would slowly dissipate with the wind. Just like what happened just now. Her teacher had only used a game skin, and was able to neutralize a powerful encirclement and annihilation into nothingness. Look at their indignant expressions just now. Looking at how happy they were right now. Nian Nian really couldn't take it anymore. At this moment, she really wanted to ask everyone present. What do you think? Was Li Tangyue wrong? Or was the world wrong? Why? I only found a problem when I looked at the comments. Haven't you all had the experience of chasing a teacher off the stage? Not only did you ask the teacher to leave, but it was also very common to ask your classmates to leave. I personally experienced it 3 times, twice in my own class, and once in the next class. So I think the probability of this happening should be very high, right? Mobile version updated the fastest website. Chapter 563. If she were to use a certain celebrity's catchphrase as a primer, it would be, "My wish is for world peace." Nian Nian wasn't that noble and noble. At such a young age, she probably wouldn't be able to understand what world peace was. She just didn't want to see Li Tangyue being bullied by others. Why? Why did everyone bully her? Just because she was fat? Just because she was a coward? Just because she smelled bad at all times? That smell was indeed unpleasant. But Li Tangyue didn't want it to be like this. It was worth mentioning here that children with non-alcoholic fatty liver were prone to multiple vitamin deficiencies, including glossitis, angular cheilitis, ecchymosis, hyperkeratosis, and so on. They were also prone to loss of appetite and sweating profusely. The essence of severe cirrhosis was severe hepatitis, and inflammation would cause bad breath and body odor. Patients naturally couldn't bathe as frequently as normal people, so Li Tangyue smelled bad at all times. This was also the main reason why no one was willing to get close to her, let alone become friends with her. Not only was she ugly, but she also smelled bad. Who could stand that? Probably only Nian, who had her own body fragrance, was immune to this smell. Li Tangyue knew that she had bad breath and body odor, so she usually covered herself tightly with her autumn school uniform and wouldn't speak easily. It was clearly just a physical illness, but now it was more like a mental illness. Nian really didn't understand, weren't patients a vulnerable group? But why did everyone ostracize her, bully her, and even take pleasure in it? The teacher had already heard about the students ostracizing Li Tangyue. However, as a teacher, he was powerless in such a situation. This was the collective will of the 6th grade class too. Even as the actual leader of this group, he couldn't forcefully change this will. The only thing the teacher could do was to give Li Tangyue some extra help, such as taking care of Li Tangyue in her studies or psychological counseling. After all, she could only rely on herself to get rid of the shadow of her childhood. Is this your wish? After hearing Nian's words, the teacher couldn't help but have a flash of admiration on his face. Finally, someone stood up for Li Tangyue. Thus, the teacher took this opportunity to seriously brainstorm the entire class. Did you all hear what Chen Yan said? I don't know who took the lead to kick Li Tangyue out of our class just now, and I don't want to find out who took the lead. I just hope that you can understand. Li Tangyue is also a member of our class. Li Tangyue is indeed in the wrong first, but this is not an excuse for you to ostracize her. Chen Yan's words make a lot of sense. If you guys hadn't ostracized Li Tangyue first, how could she have been caught by the inspection team hiding in the classroom? She's a patient. Is this how you treat patients? Think about it carefully. Are your actions just now worthy of the red scarves on your necks? As the saying goes, the law cannot punish the majority. Under such circumstances, the teacher could only speak eloquently to everyone present. Not everyone hated Li Tangyue from the bottom of their hearts. They just liked to follow the trend, because if they chose to stand on Li Tangyue's side, it meant that they would have to go against the majority of the class. Not everyone was as firm as Nian, and not everyone was as strong as Nian. They were afraid of being ostracized, so they chose to stand on the side of the majority. Previously, when Li Tangyue was bullied, she would only hold it in and not say a word. Today, because of Nian, the teacher finally seized the opportunity to educate the entire class. Perhaps the teacher's words had an effect. Therefore, when the teacher asked everyone if they would treat Li Tangyue with a friendly attitude in the future, most of the students in the class nodded gently. Everyone must remember that we are a group, and a group is absolutely inseparable from unity. So I hope that similar things won't happen again. Can we? After the teacher's speech, there was a burst of warm applause from the audience. But applause was applause. Nian looked back and found that many of her classmates still had a disapproving expression on their faces. It was obvious that they would not change their views just because of their teacher's speech. Perhaps in the short term, they would not do anything excessive. But as time passed, everything would become the same as before. The leader would continue to lead, and the follower would continue to follow. The root of the problem was still Li Tangyue. At that moment, Nian couldn't help but feel a little lost. What could she do to help Li Tangyue out of her current predicament? With this question in mind, Nian returned home and told Chen-Shi everything that happened today. In this regard, Chen-Shi took the opportunity to give the little girl a piece of advice. Never use your own misfortune to beg for others' pity. Li Tangyue was indeed wrong. Her mistake was to seal herself off, so that no one could perceive her inner feelings. The more Li Tangyue kept silent about all the injustices she had encountered, the more it showed that she cared. She was afraid of becoming a weirdo in the eyes of others, but she didn't know that she had already become a weirdo in the eyes of others. When a person loses the least bit of strength and optimism, she is destined to have a tragic ending. What's wrong with a fatty? Can't a fatty be optimistic and confident? Can't a fatty have friends? If Li Tangyue had opened her heart earlier and tried to make a few sincere friends, would she have fallen to this point today? This kind of mentality was not right. It was worthy of criticism. Of course, Li Tangyue was only a 12-year-old child after all. Naturally, it was impossible for her to have a strong heart like an adult. So, Chunqi still had a certain degree of sympathy for Li Tangyue's experience. Hey Nian, this is the all-nourishing pill that Dad recently developed. It's a secret ancestral Chinese medicine prescription. It's guaranteed to cure all diseases, and the effect is great. Take it and give it to her. It should be able to cure her illness. Chunqi hadn't refined medicine for a long time, so this pill was taken from Big Cat's plate. Nian didn't know that her father had such a trick up his sleeve, so when she heard that this pill could cure Li Tangyue, her face suddenly showed an extremely excited expression. Nian, you must remember, not everyone is as lucky as Li Tangyue. If one day you fall into the same predicament as her, then you must remember, you must never be like her in the future. Only when you learn to be strong can you walk out of all the difficulties you face. Do you understand? Nian was very happy because she got the pill, but Chunqi took the opportunity to lecture her. Perhaps it was because today's matter had left a deep impression on her, so when Chunqi's voice fell, the little girl actually stood there in a daze, as if deep in thought. Seeing this, Chunqi wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he squatted beside her and looked at her with a smile. After a long while, Nian seemed to have suddenly thought of something. She couldn't help but look at Chunqi and answered with certainty, I understand. Good, it's good that you understand. 9 Heavens, Divine Emperor. Chapter 564. In the blink of an eye, it was winter in Shangjing. There were 2 types of winters in Shangjing. One was a sunny day when the sun was shining, and the other was a cloudy day when it was about to snow. When it was sunny, the sky was blue, just like the windows that the family cleaned during the new year. It was clean and transparent. Looking up at the sky from the ground, the clouds were like ethereal white ribbons, fluttering above one's head. It was a kind of lofty and cold beauty. The cold northwest wind blew, blowing away the haze above the city and the coldness in people's hearts. This was probably the reason why Nian liked winter so much. Only in winter would this little girl, wrapped in a thick quilted jacket, act like she used to. She didn't care about her image as an official. As long as she saw the snow piled up to a certain height in the corner of the wall, she would jump up high and then sit down heavily on it. Even though she had been in Shangjing for many years, this silly girl still had the characteristics of a southerner who loved to play with snow. Therefore, her behavior always caused the next-door neighbor to laugh heartily. It really was like the saying, Southerners think that snow is fun, while Northerners think that Southerners are more fun. After talking about sunny days, it was time to talk about cloudy days. If Shangjing was cold on a sunny day, then Shangjing was manic on a cloudy day. Coincidentally, today was such a cloudy day. It was currently morning, but the sky was gray and only a sliver of white light could be seen. Nian leaned against the window and took a look. Her little mouth immediately pouted so much that she could hang an oil bottle. Her father didn't allow her to go out because it was windy outside. The little girl was not convinced, so she ignored Chunqi's dissuasion and forced open the door and ran out into the courtyard. But as soon as she stepped out of the door, the biting cold wind seemed to have found a vent and smashed into her face with snowflakes. What entered her eyes was a vast expanse of white, making it hard for her to open her eyes. If it was only raining and not windy, then Nian could carry her textbooks to the courtyard and enjoy the snow while studying. Wasn't this a very artistic matter? She might even be able to comprehend some incredible principles of heaven and earth from it. Speaking of which, Nian had reached the age where she loved to fantasize. In fact, to ordinary people, Shangjing was just a slightly bigger city. However, after carefully observing the surroundings, one would discover that in a place like Shangjing, there was no trace of the childlike atmosphere of one's hometown. It operated in an orderly manner. Even though many cultural places were forcibly created for people to reminisce about, it still gave people a sense of discomfort. Everything here seemed so deliberate. Even if an outsider lived here for 10 or 20 years, they would never be able to truly become a citizen of Shangjing. Perhaps when the last batch of Shangjing natives gradually grew old, the stories in those old alleys would slowly dry up with time, right? The wind outside was too strong, so Nian couldn't go out. Chunshi took the remote control and accompanied her to watch the Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber. Didn't her Xinshin Nian's 9-yang divine art come from here? Thus, not long after the TV started, Nian was completely immersed in it. When she was in high spirits, this silly girl would even excitedly stand on the bed and dance her arms and legs to imitate the moves on TV. Hey, father, take this. Eat my Xianming divine palm. Hey, don't move. Father, you're frozen by me. Ha 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 ha. Now that martial arts were popular, the students in the class would occasionally exchange a few moves with each other. Naturally, Nian was no exception. However, she was after all a girl, and at the same time, she was also the class monitor of the 6th grade class too. Thus, she naturally couldn't be like the others who fooled around with each other. Thinking about it, only in front of Chun could she be like the other children and show her innocent side without any hindrance. Nian excitedly jumped around on the bed. Chun sat on the edge of the bed with a fatherly smile on his face. The cold wind whistled outside the room, but the room was warm and harmonious. The only thing that made people feel a little regretful was that Ying was still in closed-door cultivation. No one knew when she would successfully break through to the golden core stage. Because of this, Nian even moved next door to live with Chunshi. Father, when will mother finish revising her homework? It feels like she hasn't been out for a long time. Perhaps it was because the hearts of father and daughter were connected, so when Chunshi thought of Qin Ruoying, Nian had already opened her mouth to ask. Should be soon. Don't worry, don't worry. Chunshi didn't give a definite answer. After all, core formation was like childbirth. Even if you knew that the child was already pregnant, you couldn't be sure exactly when the child would be born. Of course, cesarean section was an exception. Speaking of which, it was a coincidence. Just as the father and daughter were talking, an extremely strong wave of true essence suddenly surged in the courtyard. Immediately after, an earth-shattering muffled sound of thunder rang in the sky. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The rolling thunder suddenly sounded. Even though they were separated by a window, Nian was shocked. It's thunder. Father, it's thunder. Is it going to rain? In the middle of winter, there's actually thunder. Nian was now a top student, so she clearly remembered that her natural science teacher once said that the formation of thunderclouds generally required 2 conditions, which were sufficient water vapor and intense convective movement. The temperature in winter was dry, and the sun's radiation was weak, so it was basically impossible for thunder to appear. Thus, as soon as the thunder roared, the little girl lay on the bed and quickly crawled to the window. As the saying went, thunder in winter, 9 out of 10 cattle fences were empty. Thunder in winter was news that would appear on TV. Nian was excitedly waiting for the thunder to sound again, but Chunshi frowned and looked in the direction of the room next door. No, this was not Ying's aura. Although Ying was only 1 step away from core formation, this step was not so easy to cross. Rumble. The rolling thunder sounded again. Immediately after, a ray of light suddenly flashed in the sky. Whoa! Nian subconsciously took a cold breath, because she saw with her own eyes that the lightning struck the center of their yard. Father, father. Perhaps because she was too excited, Nian's voice changed a lot. She called out a couple of times. When she looked back, she found that Chunshi had left the room at some point. This made Nian anxious. Therefore, she did not care whether it was still raining or thunder outside, and rushed out of the room. Father? Where did you go? While shouting for her father, Nian opened the door. However, as soon as she stepped out of the door, she was lifted up by a gentle force. What's wrong? Are you scared? I forgot to mention that during this period of time, people were on tenterhooks. It was said that 210,000 books were banned from the city channel. The boss of Jinjiang was also invited for tea. This was the strictest in history, so during this period of time, everyone was frantically self-examining. Forgive me, keep a low profile. Chapter 565. After Nian ran out of the house, Chunshi gently picked her up. Feeling the sense of security brought to her by her father's arms, The little girl quickly returned to her fearless nature. Thus, she faced the sky full of snow and thunder and shouted excitedly, as if she was watching a sci-fi movie. She did not take the natural wonders in front of her seriously at all. Boom, boom, boom. One after another, the sound of thunder exploded in the sky. The flowers and trees in the courtyard were all blown away by the fierce wind that came out of nowhere. If it was summer now, this kind of weather would be a very normal change in climate. However, with the addition of the bone-chilling snowflakes, the situation obviously became a little strange. Looking at the terrible scene of the raging snow and thunder, if nothing unexpected happened tomorrow, the hot search list would definitely see the word Shangjing, thunder, tribulation, and so on. All units, all units, all units, all units, all units, attention. It seems that there is a fellow cultivator in front of us who is going through a tribulation. Please retreat quickly. In fact, for a real cultivator, how could a few lightning bolts be considered a tribulation? Not to mention a supreme existence like Chunxi, even the little rookies in the golden core stage probably would not take the thunder and lightning seriously. Heavenly tribulation did exist, but it was completely different from what everyone imagined. After all, it was a level that even Chunxi could not touch. With the mentality of watching a show, Chunxi took the little girl under the eaves to enjoy the wind for a while. Today, this strange phenomenon of heaven and earth lasted for about half an hour, and then slowly subsided. The sky returned to its previous dark and calm. The wind stopped, but the snow did not stop. Large pieces of snow sprinkled in the courtyard, and in a short while, the ground was covered with a layer of light white frost. Just as Nian could not wait to go to the courtyard to build a snowman, a light sound suddenly came from the main hall. Creak. Then, a figure that they had not seen for a long time appeared in front of the father and daughter. Nian turned her head to take a look. After seeing the appearance of the person who came, her face suddenly revealed an incomparably bright smile. Grandfather, you're back. The person who came was Qin Yongyan, who had disappeared for a long time. The heaven and earth anomaly just now was caused by him successfully condensing the golden core. As usual, when Nian saw Qin Yongyan, she eagerly rushed up to him, wanting him to carry her. However, just as she was about to approach Qin Yongyan, an invisible force sent her flying. If it wasn't for Chunxi's timely intervention, Nian might have been injured. And this is the so-called celestial being. Golden core stage. Chunxi finally understood why Yingying's aptitude was so bad. Wasn't her father a real mediocre? Even with the accumulation of various resources, it still took him such a long time to break through to the gold core realm. From this point of view, Yingying and her father's aptitude was indeed much worse than that of his sister-in-law's family. Fortunately, there was such an excellent live-in son-in-law, like Chunxi, to improve the bloodline of the Qin family. Otherwise, what would the Qin family do in the future? Father, congratulations. After all, Qin Yongyan was Yingying's father. Since his father-in-law had a major breakthrough in his cultivation, Chunxi naturally had to send his blessings as soon as possible. Therefore, he brought Nian and respectfully greeted Qin Yongyan. Although they had lived under the same roof for many years, Chunxi still felt a little awkward when interacting with Qin Yongyan now. Perhaps this was the true portrayal of the relationship between a father-in-law and a son-in-law. Qin Yongyan had finally come out of seclusion. As a junior, Chunxi brought Nian to sit with him in the main hall for a while. Although it was just an awkward conversation, it was still a necessary etiquette, wasn't it? But what was there to talk about between a father-in-law and a son-in-law? In the end, the topic still turned to Qin Ruoying. Chunxi, is Yingying about to come out of seclusion? Why do I feel that the aura on her body seems to be much more powerful than mine now? As he spoke, Qin Yongyan turned his gaze to the west wing. After successfully condensing his gold core, his understanding of cultivation was naturally different from before. Therefore, even though there was a restriction isolation, Qin Yongyan could sense the waves of vital essence coming from Yingying's room. And this made Qin Yongyan feel a little strange. He was now considered a real gold core cultivator, and Yingying was merely at the peak of the foundation establishment stage. How could the waves of vital essence she caused be stronger than his? It didn't make sense? unless Chunxi gave Yingying special treatment. Thinking of this, Qin Yongyan couldn't help but look at Chunxi again. He wasn't jealous of his daughter and thought that Chunxi was biased. He just wanted to confirm whether Yingying's state was normal. As a father, he naturally had to care more about his daughter. However, after hearing Qin Yongyan's words, Chunxi frowned slightly. Yingying's aura had suddenly become stronger recently. Previously, he had thought that Yingying was about to break through, which was why such a situation had occurred. According to his original estimation, Qin Ruoying would have a breakthrough within 3 months. But now, compared to Qin Yongyan's situation when he broke through, Chunxi's heart was a little uncertain. It seemed a little strange. Maybe I've poured too many resources into Yingying, so her aura when she forms her gold core is stronger than ordinary people. This kind of wave is indeed a little strange, but you can rest assured. With me here, there won't be any problems. After thinking for a while, Chunxi finally gave a clear answer. The most taboo when one was breaking through in seclusion was to be disturbed, so Chunxi didn't dare to release his divine sense to observe the situation in the West Wing. Although he couldn't be sure of Yingying's situation now, with Chunxi's strength, he was still confident that he could protect Qin Ruoying's safety. After all, he was the best midwife in the world. After hearing Chunxi's guarantee, Qin Yongyan was finally relieved, so he wanted to change the topic and ask about Qin Xueqing's recent situation. But before he could ask, Nian, who had been silent all this time, suddenly opened her mouth and interrupted the two's conversation. Of course, my mother is the most powerful mother in the world. After she finished speaking, the little girl even raised her chin proudly. So, when Chunxi and Qin Yongyan were talking, they didn't avoid the little girl. Although she couldn't understand their conversation, she could roughly understand the meaning of their words. The general meaning was, Mother is very powerful. She scared father and grandfather. Therefore, this little girl couldn't wait to jump out and show off, and at the same time, emphasize her existence. Note: have you forgotten that I've been banned 3 times before? I haven't been released yet. Yes, when the book review section can be displayed normally, this storm should be over. Chapter 566. After hearing Nianyan's words, Chunxi and Qin Yongyan couldn't help but shake their heads and laugh. Hey, didn't you always say that Dad is the most powerful person in the world? Why are you suddenly saying Mom is the most powerful person in the world? Do you like the new and hate the old so much? Chunxi pretended to be jealous and pinched her face. Hearing this, Nianyan answered matter-of-factly. Dad is the most powerful dad, Mom is the most powerful mom, and Grandpa is the most powerful grandpa. There's no conflict. After hearing this, the husband and son-in-law couldn't help but burst out laughing. This child was really the happiest person in the family. After being interrupted by Nianyan, the atmosphere in the family became much more relaxed and comfortable. After Chunxi and Qin Yongyan chatted for a while, there was a sudden soft knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Big Cat was lying on the beam and taking a nap. After hearing the knock, it immediately took on the responsibility of guarding the house. It quickly jumped to the wall in the front yard and poked half of its head out to look outside. Hello, Mr. Chun. It's me, Xiao Wang from the inspection department. Outside the yard, Xiao Wang from the Wulian inspection department stretched his neck and shouted into the house. Chunxi had never put on airs in front of Xiao Wang, so Xiao Wang was getting bolder and bolder. Now he even dared to shout loudly outside the yard. In the house, Chunxi and Qin Yongyan looked at each other and smiled knowingly. Obviously, they had already guessed the purpose of Xiao Wang's visit. Please come in. Chunxi's voice suddenly sounded. Xiao Wang hesitated for a moment, then gently pushed open the gate. This was the first time he entered the courtyard. It was obvious that little Wang was in awe of this quadrangular courtyard that had long been dubbed as a forbidden place by the Martial Alliance's internal members. It was to the extent that he did not even dare to look around when he entered the courtyard. Instead, he quickly walked to the inner courtyard with his head lowered. Come in and sit. Don't worry, there are no outsiders at home. Just like the local officials in ancient times who were fortunate enough to meet the emperor, little Wang felt as if he had arrived at the throne room the moment he entered the courtyard. A strong pressure even made him breathless. When Chen Shi saw how uncomfortable Xiao Wang looked, he was stunned for a moment. Then he said to Qin Yongyan tactfully, "Dad, you just broke through. You should learn to control yourself." Hearing this, Qin Yongyan suddenly had a look of realization. Did he scare little Wang? However, there was nothing he could do. Qin Yongyan had just broken through, and his aura was still somewhat unstable. It was inevitable that he would lose control of the vital essence in his body. Thanks to Chen Shi's help, little Wang was able to escape from this pressure. This was the might of a gold core elder. Little Wang stole a glance at Qin Yongyan with lingering fear. After regaining his senses, he forced himself to calm down and said to the two people in the hall, "Seniors, it's like this. Just now, our colleagues from the investigation department discovered a huge energy fluctuation in your courtyard. We guessed that someone broke through to the celestial realm here, so the leader sent me here to confirm, so that the headquarters can update the file in time." Update the file? After hearing little Wang's words, Chen Shi and Qin Yongyan revealed a meaningful smile on their faces. Who was little Wang's leader? Wasn't it Wang Chuanju and her husband? Why didn't they call to ask in person, but instead sent little Wang to visit and confirm? Wasn't it because Qin Yongyan had always been disgusted with these worldly institutions, and only wanted to concentrate on cultivation? Before this, Qin Yongyan had even advised Wang Chuanju and her husband many times, hoping that they would put more effort into cultivation. After all, Qin Yongyan was the eldest brother, so naturally his words carried a lot of weight. However, for civil servants like Wang Chuanju and her husband who wholeheartedly served the country and its people, their personal interests obviously couldn't be compared to the interests of the country. Therefore, they sent little Wang to visit. They wanted to put aside their personal feelings and extend an olive branch to this newly ascended celestial realm person from the perspective of the country. To be honest, Wang Chuanju didn't even think that Qin Yongyan would agree to join the Wu Lian. The reason she sent little Wang over was just to go through the formalities, to show the Wu Lian's respect for every powerhouse in the country. However, what Wang Chuanju never expected was, after hearing little Wang's words, a playful smile suddenly appeared on Qin Yongyan's face. Other than updating the file, does your leader have any other instructions? Little Wang couldn't help but be stunned. Although he was young, his work ability was still very strong. Therefore, little Wang instantly understood what Qin Yongyan was implying. He hurriedly replied, "Leader also said that she actually has something that she needs your help with. If you're willing to make a trip, she'll definitely personally brew a pot of Longjing tea before the Rain Festival for you. She'll be waiting for you to come." After hearing little Wang's words, Qin Yongyan instantly burst into laughter. "Oh, my sister-in-law. She's already a leader. Why is she still so stingy?" With a smile on his face, Qin Yongyan stood up. Seeing this, little Wang hurriedly stood up and stood aside. He couldn't hide the joy on his face. "Chen Shi, I'm sure you know that your second aunt isn't the kind of person who would visit you for no reason. Your cultivation level is high, so she can't order you around too often. Since I just had a breakthrough, why don't I go over and see if there's anything I can help with and consolidate my current cultivation level? I'll leave the family to you. When Yingying comes out, remember to inform me. When the time comes, I'll call Yongwang and Chuanju. Our family should also have a good gathering." After some advice, Qin Yongyan followed little Wang out of the courtyard. Chen Shi held Nianyan's hand and stood behind the door to say goodbye to him. Although Qin Yongyan said that he just wanted to go to Wu Lian for a cup of tea, he and Chen Shi both knew that this trip would take some time. Although Wang Chuanju didn't say it explicitly, her actions had already explained. She should have encountered some problems recently. It couldn't be helped. Who told his sister-in-law to sneak to the Supreme Palace enclosure? Without a powerful fighter like Qin Shiueching, Wang Chuanju's work was naturally difficult, so she needed the help of her family. After all, the people living in this courtyard were a family. Even if Wang Chuanju and her husband didn't come back all year round, their room would always be there. "Okay, Dad." After listening to Qin Yongyan's advice, Chen Shi nodded silently. To be honest, in Qin Yongyan's words, he actually felt a trace of the warmth of a family. Unlike the small family he and Yingying formed, The warmth of a big family was usually impossible to feel. But this gentle and silent warmth was no less than the weight of his and Inying's small family. Thinking about it. Chapter 567. This year's spring festival was half a month earlier than previous years. January 24th was New Year's Eve. Therefore, as soon as New Year's Day was over, there was a festive atmosphere in Beijing. Red lanterns were hung on the lampposts by the roadside, and a series of festive decorations such as peach blossoms were placed at the entrance of major shopping malls. It seemed that people wanted to continue the New Year's Day celebration until the spring festival. Unfortunately, the New Year's Day holiday was only 3 days, including 2 weekends. For the children who could never have enough fun, such a short holiday was obviously no different from not having a holiday at all. In the blink of an eye, Nian had to carry her backpack and report to school on time. People often say that responsibility makes people grow up. As she grew older and gradually matured, Nian was no longer as playful and willful as before. Since she carried the responsibility of the class leader, she naturally had to set an example. Therefore, while the other students in the class were still immersed in the joy of the holiday, Nian had already come to the classroom and replaced the student on duty to do the work. She wiped the blackboard, swept the floor, took out the trash, set up the tables and chairs. While she was busy, the other students also came to the classroom one after another, but no one took the initiative to help her. In this regard, Nian did not take it to heart. Instead, she continued to huff and puff non-stop. She was the class leader, so she was both the study committee member, the discipline committee member, and the health committee member. If the class leader didn't take the lead, how could the other students believe in her? It could be seen that Nian's prestige was not for nothing. After Nian was busy for a while, the other students also came to the classroom one after another. She stood on the podium and looked around. She only felt that the empty seat in front of her was so dazzling. Li Tangyue hadn't come to school for a long time. The day after Nian gave the pill to Li Tangyue, this fat girl's parents asked for a very long leave on her behalf. Li Tangyue's disappearance didn't cause any commotion. No one laughed at her, and no one excluded her. Other than Nian, no one else would care about this big idiot who was already ostracized. Do you still remember the scene when the whole class shouted, "Li Tangyue, get out of here"? Nian didn't know how Li Tangyue felt at that time, but as a bystander, it was an unforgettable scene. It was also from that day onwards that Nian truly experienced a brand new feeling. The name of this feeling is sorrowful. She felt sad for Li Tangyue's situation, and also sad that she couldn't help others. Don't think that children don't know how to think about life. In fact, their spiritual world is very rich. Happiness, anger, sorrow, joy, sorrow, fear, and worry. They could think, fantasize, quarrel, fall in love, lie, be jealous, and even chase after stars like adults. And only in this way would they be a complete human. As the rest of the students entered the classroom, Li Tangyue's empty seat became more and more conspicuous. And this also cast a shadow over Nian's originally good mood. Her mood suddenly became a little gloomy, so after finishing the work at hand, she directly returned to her seat and spaced out. There were still a few minutes before class started, so most of the students returned to their seats to prepare for class. But at this moment, the skinny monkey suddenly jumped into the classroom from the back door and opened his mouth to shout, "Extra, extra! There's big news again. Do you want to hear it?" The skinny monkey said as he waved the paper in his hand. "Why are you keeping us in suspense? Hurry up. Yeah, hurry up and tell us." As the little smart guy in the class, the skinny monkey liked to go around collecting news, and then bring the news back to the class firsthand to gain the attention of the students. Therefore, when the skinny monkey heard the students' agreement, he suddenly laughed proudly. "Dang, dang, dang, dang. Look, this is a love letter from Zhongchen from the next class to our class leader. It's so mushy. Do you want me to read it to you?" The first half of the 6th grade semester was coming to an end. In a few more months, everyone present would be able to successfully remove the label of primary school students and become secondary school students. Therefore, some of the precocious children were now even more unscrupulous. According to past experience, It should be a very secretive behavior for elementary school students to send love letters to each other. However, the skinny monkey got the information from somewhere, so his words immediately caused quite a stir in the class. Read it. Hurry up and read it. Hurry up. The teacher is coming. Our class leader skipped 2 grades. Is Zhongchen an old cow eating young grass? Ha 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 ha. It had to be said that hearing the words an old cow eating young grass from the mouth of these little brats was a bit strange. But as far as everyone in the class was concerned, no one felt that there was anything wrong with this sentence. Instead, they all agreed. This was because in this school, the 6th grade students were the oldest. Of course, this did not include Nian Nian. The skinny monkey usually liked to play to the gallery, so when he received such a rare file, he was even more excited. Therefore, the moment he received the response of the students, this kid opened the envelope and read it directly. Then I'll read it. Everyone listen up. Chen Yan. Hello, I'm Zhong Chen from the 6th grade class 2. Nice to meet you. Actually, I've always wanted to. The skinny monkey read the contents of the envelope with great emotion. However, he had only just read the beginning of the letter when his voice was suddenly interrupted by a stationery box that was thrown at him. Bang! The stationery box did not hit the skinny monkey. Instead, it hit the wall not far away from him. Even so, this sudden loud noise still shocked everyone. Then, under everyone's gaze, Nian Nian walked in front of the skinny monkey with an expressionless face. Give it to me. It was a simple and powerful word. At that moment, the skinny monkey looked at the class leader who was a few centimeters shorter than him in front of him, and felt terrified from the bottom of his heart. He was frightened by Nian Nian's gaze. It had been so long since school started, but this was the first time the skinny monkey saw Nian Nian reveal such a gaze. It was a gaze that was cold enough to make people tremble. It was like a queen with a strong aura. The skinny monkey was obviously frightened. He quickly stuffed the envelope into Nian Nian's hands and ran back to his seat like a wisp of smoke. Then he lowered his head and did not dare to say a word. For a moment, the entire classroom was silent. Rip. With a soft sound, Nian Nian tore the envelope in her hand into pieces and threw them into the trash can. Then, she slowly turned around and glanced at everyone in the room with an expressionless face. Very fun, right? Chapter 568. She looked at the skinny monkey who liked to play to the gallery, and then looked at the students who were blindly cheering. At that moment, Nian Nian's mood was particularly complicated. She had been to many classes and met many new students, but there was really no class that was as cold as 6th grade class 2. This class seemed to be united on the surface, but in their bones, it was like a sandstone fortress. With a gentle splash of water, such a huge fortress would instantly turn into scattered sand. Just like now, she was the sudden splash of cold water. Unlike the classes Nian Nian had been in before, the students in 6th grade class 2 preferred to see others embarrassed, and some even took pleasure in it. Not only one person, but the whole class was like this. The reason for this phenomenon was actually very simple. Because everyone in the class had witnessed the whole process of Li Tangyue being excluded, they were very afraid that one day they would become the same person as Li Tangyue. Don't underestimate the influence of a class on a child. After all, this was the only group they could come into contact with after leaving home. Since they had come to a new group, there were obviously only 2 choices in front of them as independent individuals. Either integrate into it or drift away. How to integrate? That was to work harder to exclude others and use them as a shield to make themselves safer, and less likely to be discovered if they hid in the crowd. Looking at the entire capital-affiliated primary school, such a problematic class was actually very rare. Only some specific factors could create such a special situation. Therefore, when Nian Nian first came to this class, she didn't find any difference between this class and the other classes. If 6th grade class 2's class was exclusive, then Nian Nian, who had always been upright and friendly, obviously couldn't agree with such a collective atmosphere. She was like a gust of wind blowing from the mountains, with a completely different smell, and was bound to blow away the stench that permeated the classroom. Of course, this was definitely not something that could be done overnight. If there had to be a word to describe it, then the word must be influence. Like a preacher, she used her words and actions to influence everyone around her. When they were no longer able to form a group, a new collective will would be born from this. After all, Nian was not Li Tangyue. Although she was young, she was not someone to be bullied. Therefore, when Nian threw a tantrum, the class immediately quieted down. The entire classroom was silent. Because he was afraid that Nian would beat him up, the skinny monkey was so scared that he didn't even dare to raise his head. But the good thing was, Nian tore up the letter in her hand and threw it away. She had no intention of denouncing him. Instead, she silently returned to her seat. There were so many people who liked her, so what was a mere Zhongchen? Regarding this, Nian did not even take it to heart. Perhaps only the students in the class who had never seen the world would find this kind of thing very novel, right? The silence in the classroom did not last long. Soon a melodious ringtone sounded in the corridor. Now for the morning reading. Please turn to page 22. The Story of the Deer and the Wolf. According to the teacher's previous instructions, after the ringtone sounded, Nian picked up the textbook and went directly to the podium. This was already an old rule, so even if the teacher had not arrived yet, the students picked up their textbooks and read aloud with Nian. Roosevelt would never have thought that the wolf he ordered to kill was actually the protector of the forest. It seems cruel for a wolf to eat a deer, but it maintains the stability of the deer population. Accompanied by a burst of neat reading, the teacher quickly walked into the classroom. Everyone, stop for a moment. I have something to announce. As soon as the teacher entered the door, she clapped her hands and directly interrupted the students' morning reading. Seeing this, Nian thought that the teacher was going to use the morning reading time to lecture everyone again. So she immediately picked up her textbook and walked off the podium. But the moment she turned around and walked off the podium, Nian suddenly froze in place. Because she saw the figure standing outside the classroom door. Li Tangyue. Because of her health, Li Tangyue applied for 2 months of leave from me. Now, she has finally returned safely. So I hope everyone can welcome her with warm applause. Applause. After that, the teacher took the lead in applauding. Unlike the teacher's enthusiasm, after the students heard the words Li Tangyue, they were obviously a little uninterested. It was as if they had not eaten breakfast. In the sparse applause, only Nian was clapping hard. Then, the figure who had been hiding outside the door slowly walked into the classroom under the encouragement of the teacher's eyes. F*CK? Li Tangyue. Look. Is this Li Tangyue? Wow. She is Li Tangyue. Are you kidding me? The ancient said, a scholar who has been away for 3 days should be looked at with new eyes. How long had Li Tangyue been gone? It seemed to be more than 2 months. In everyone's impression, Li Tangyue was actually like an old sow in a pigsty, fat and smelly. However, the figure who slowly walked into the classroom was completely different from everyone's impression. Was this really Li Tangyue? Although fatties were all potential stocks, wasn't this too exaggerated? Li Tangyue was tall to begin with. She was at least half a head taller than Nian. She was estimated to be at least 1.65 meters tall. Children nowadays were well nourished. In the north 1.65 meters was not too unusual. But who would have thought, after Li Tangyue lost weight, she would actually be so beautiful? Zhao Yu was already beautiful enough, right? But compared to Li Tangyue, not only did Zhao Yu lose her height advantage, even her face was inferior to Li Tangyue's. Zhao Yu's nose bridge was not high, and she had always relied on makeup to make up for it. Li Tangyue did not have these worries. Because her facial features were originally very exquisite, she only needed to stand there casually, and immediately formed a beautiful picture with Nian beside her. Was this still the Li Tangyue in everyone's memory? The current her seemed to be truly worthy of her name. The beauty of the Chinese Tangyue can't be ignored. The moon is bright, and the outstanding people are gathered. Li Tangyue's appearance also successfully caused a commotion in the classroom. Just as everyone was discussing whether or not she was Li Tangyue was still the same as before. She shrugged her head and quickly walked back to her seat. Okay, everyone quiet down and get ready for class. She is indeed Li Tangyue. Yeah, but she's a lot thinner than before. Li Tangyue was more than a lot thinner? It was like she had undergone liposuction surgery. Perhaps because they were too shocked, no matter how the teacher called out, the students could not quiet down. At this moment, Li Tangyue, as the person involved, secretly wrote a note and handed it to Nian. There was only one line on the paper. It said, "Thank you, Nian." Chapter 569. Speaking of which, it was strange. Since the day Li Tangyue returned to the class, the overall atmosphere of the class changed a lot. Even Skinny Monkey, who used to yell big idiot, when he had nothing to do, suddenly became a little quiet. He no longer hid in the crowd blindly, and he no longer excitedly spread some gossip that he heard from the next class. It felt like he suddenly changed his temperament, and his whole person became a lot quieter and more reserved. It was obvious that the Skinny Monkey fell into the vortex of love. There was no way to hide liking someone, especially at the age of first awakening of love. Although Nian didn't understand why the Skinny Monkey suddenly became a little strange. Her intuition told her that the Skinny Monkey's change couldn't be separated from Li Tangyue. Didn't you see that the Skinny Monkey didn't like to run around anymore? Every time during class, this kid would deliberately pretend to be obsessed with studying, and then constantly peek at Li Tangyue from the corner of his eyes. This kind of behavior that bordered on infatuation. Wasn't it obvious enough? In this regard, Li Tangyue seemed to be aware of it. Just like the turnaround of the ugly girl, the Princess Diaries, and the small thing of first love, the huge change in appearance unconsciously gave her a strong sense of self-confidence. Slowly, no one dared to mock her anymore, and no one shouted for her to get out of class 2, grade 6. Noticing that everyone's attitude towards her had changed, and that many students were even willing to interact with her, Li Tangyue gradually regained her long-lost confidence. She was no longer hunched like before, and she no longer cowered on the table all day, because she suddenly realized one day, she could be like Nian and Zhaoyu, and become the focus of the boys' secret discussions in the class. Didn't you see the boys in the next class, after hearing the story of her comeback, all ran to the door of the class to watch the fun? After all, Nian was still young, so no matter how good-looking she was, her popularity in the class was limited. Li Tangyue was different. She had officially entered the puberty stage, and because she was relatively fat before after she lost weight, she looked more attractive than Zhaoyu, who was as thin as bamboo. When everyone else was still a little brat whose gender couldn't be distinguished, she had already stepped into the category of a young girl. The spotlight finally shone on her. Those things that he had never dared to hope for had now all become reality. Thus, Li Tangyue began to learn from Zhaoyu. She used the classroom corridor as a runway. Every time she passed by the crowd, her chin was so high. In the past, she was so afraid of being noticed by others. But now she desperately wanted to be noticed by others. Regarding the various changes in Li Tangyue, Nian was definitely the one who felt it the most. Therefore, while Nian was happy for Li Tangyue, she couldn't help but have a very strange feeling in her heart. Especially on the day of the holidays. After the teacher finished assigning the winter vacation homework and officially announced the start of the holiday, Li Tangyue was the first to stand up. Then, she waved goodbye to Nian with a happy face and said, "Nian, see you next semester." After saying that, she left with the few classmates she had recently befriended. Nian silently looked at Li Tangyue's back as she left. Suddenly, she felt a little disappointed, because this scene also made her clearly feel that her relationship with Li Tangyue had become more and more distant. Maybe this was human nature? Everyone had their own personality, and the most important reason why two people could become friends was because they had the same goals and were like-minded. It was precisely because of this that Li Tangyue couldn't become Nian's good friend in the end. Not in the past. Not now either. Regarding this, although Nian felt a little disappointed, she didn't hold a grudge against Li Tangyue because of this. If she didn't want to play with her, then so be it. What's the big deal? While thinking, Nian Nian carried her bag and strode out of the classroom. However, as soon as she walked out of the classroom, she bumped into the two brothers who were rushing over excitedly. Sister. Sister. Grandpa said that we don't have to go back to our hometown this year. We'll stay here with you for the new year. Okay. Although the two brothers were now 3 grades lower than Nian Nian, but in their hearts, Nian Nian would always be their sister. Therefore, as soon as the two brothers appeared, the two of them began to shout loudly in the corridor. This was the 6th grade's territory. How many lower grade students would dare to come up here? Looking at their reckless behavior and the strange gazes of the classmates around her, Nian Nian was stunned for a moment before a bright smile bloomed on her face again. Okay. The last winter vacation of Nian Nian's elementary school life began. After careful calculation, she realized that she only had half a year left of her childhood. Perhaps this was the disadvantage of skipping grades. She was clearly less than 10 years old, but under the influence of the surrounding environment, her mind had become a lot more mature. Just like He Miao, who had been forced to grow taller, Nian Nian would only be as innocent and naive as a child her age when she was with the two brothers. She even felt a little silly, although her childhood was about to end. But the good thing was, this year's winter vacation was not the same as previous years. This was a memorable winter vacation. With the company of the two brothers, the desolation of Shangjing City did not affect Nian Nian's mood. Instead, it made her particularly excited. All day long, she was clamoring to find Wenwen and Mingming to play. From the red brick walls of the Forbidden City to the large courtyard of Prince Gong's mansion. From the magnificent atmosphere of the old summer palace to the lively marketplace of Nanluogu Alley. After she pulled the two brothers and played all the famous scenic spots around Shangjing City, the long-awaited New Year's Eve quietly came again, January 24th. New Year's Eve. Early in the morning, the Sai courtyard ushered in the most lively time of the year. Just as Nian Nian pulled the two brothers to help put up the Spring Festival couplets, Qin Yongyan also brought Qin Yongwang and his wife back to the Sai courtyard. After a while of greetings, Chen Shi, as the host, arranged the seats in the main hall. Of the 3 elders of the Qin family, Gu Lao's family, other than Qin Ruoying, who was still in seclusion, Qin Xueqing, who was far away in outer space, might not be able to make it back in time. Chen Shi did not ask Gu Lao why he did not return to his hometown this year. In any case, as long as Gu Lao was willing, he would naturally open the door to welcome him. Anyway, the more people there were, the livelier it was, right? Chapter 570. This year was a leap year, so there was one more day in February than in previous years. And because of this, it was destined that this year would be completely different from the previous years. The bustle in the courtyard lasted from New Year's Eve to the first day of the new year. The 3 little guys also felt a different new year in this lively atmosphere. There was no doubt that today's bustle would become an indelible memory of their lives. The weather this year should be good. Although it was not yet February, there was no haze of the past when looking up, and the bright sun seemed to silently announce the arrival of the warm spring. This was the so-called New Year. Looking at the 3 little guys in the courtyard who were gradually growing up, the elders could not help but show a sincere smile on their faces. Thinking about it, it was only during such a special festival like the Spring Festival that everyone could find that long-lost pleasure in the bustling atmosphere, right? In the main hall, the elders of the Qin family and Gu Lao were talking happily. In the courtyard, the 3 little guys were jumping up and down playing. The firecrackers of the first day of the new year were non-stop, and the people of the country seemed to be immersed in this happy atmosphere. Only Chen Shi was standing quietly in a daze outside the west wing at this moment. Dad, what are you thinking about? Nian Nian noticed Chen Shi's strange behavior. So after playing with the 2 brothers in the courtyard for a while, she came up to Chen Shi while panting, and then used her big eyes to size up Chen Shi. Nothing, I'm waiting for your mom. When she finishes reviewing her homework, we can go out and play with you. Then can I go in and urge mom? Obviously, the little girl was a little impatient. Seeing this, Chen Shi just smiled and pinched her little face, then gently shook his head. No, homework is very important, just like your winter homework. If you don't finish it, Mom will be scolded by the teacher. Isn't today the new year? The teacher said that we don't have to do homework during the new year. Chunxi's explanation obviously did not convince her. Therefore, Nian suddenly pouted with an unhappy face. What homework is so important? The teacher said that we don't have to do homework during the new year. Good girl, Mom is an adult. Of course adults and children are different. How about this, you guys discuss where you want to go to play later. When Mom is done here, Dad will take you guys directly, okay? After Chunxi's patient appeasement, the little girl finally gave up the idea of going to the West Wing to find her mother, and happily discussed the itinerary with the brothers. The clingy little girl finally ran away. Then, the smile on Chunxi's face suddenly turned serious. He was in a bad mood. It was not because of a certain matter or a certain person, but because he was in a bad mood.